page 1 on the docket, these are hearings. It might be that you would prefer that we take up any questions on those.
I have a question. Does it take 8 to vote resolution of feasibility? You sure it's not 7?
8.
What is it a percentage?
4/5.
What's 4/5 of 9?
8.
36 divided by 5.
There's
a man that trusts these fellows.
7
1/5 votes will float it.
Which one of you wants to be the 5th?
Well, there have been times when I felt like I was 1/5, maybe.
4/5.
1/5 of 1.
Take more than 7.
I
think we're going to talk me into something one day.
No.
Anything else on page 1?
You'll get a request at item 5, I understand, from the developer asking to extend the bonds from 10 years to 15 years.
So that's not a bid.
That's a hearing for me.
So you won't be took by surprise.
We can legally do that.
Yeah. You're inclined to do so.
I would make a recommendation one way or another on it to us.
Would that come from the attorney, the manager, or?
It's the first time that, in our recollection, in our records, that we've ever... All of our 1911 bonds have been 10-year bonds, and we don't know of any that have been 15 years. There's no legal impediment to it if you want to make it 15 years.
How about the people who are involved?
One guy.
One person?
Yeah.
It's on his property.
It will be Tavares, the Panorama City and the Genesee Road deal.
We're now financing projects with 1911 Act.
Yeah.
One thing the council will have to take into consideration is that this is not an isolated area of 15 years. If you grant the 15 years, then you will have to consider this for all future 1911 Act. And the problem you're going to run into will be the contractor's price for a job when he's bidding, when he knows that it's a 15-year rather than a 10-year bond, and there will be a price differential.
Because he said to sell the bonds and
That's correct.
discount them.
That's correct.
Is there any chance of a change in their option of 10 to 15 years after the hearing?
This is the time. It's a resolution of intention to change. I think when you come down to the no, this is your last crack at it.
What is the effect? I mean, I realize there probably is an effect, but is it good or bad of the sale of the bonds?
Well, it would be a bad effect in terms of the contractor bidding on a 15-year deal.
So he would have to increase his price to get, with the discount on a 15-year sale off, that
That's
he has
correct.
to raise his price to get what he needs to get out of it.
Contractor has to look at the saleability of the bonds and the value of those bonds. And when it's a 15-year, there's a greater tendency to increase the price of
Is
the
this
bond.
man paying for all of it, the total job?
Well, he's paying for it. I think there's 2 property owners involved in this particular, just 2.
They're both agreeable?
They're both agreeable to 15 years.
Yeah,
Well, we don't care then,
Well,
do we, really?
yes, we do.
Well, the only question that I would raise to the council is that if you grant the 15-year, change from the 10-year, then I think you're going to have to take this up if anyone else in the future on a area asks to go beyond 10 years.
In the first place, aren't they using this as a method of 1911 Act rather than the normal subdivision?
Correct.
Which is a method of financing in 1911, so they don't have to put it into the subdivision.
That's
into
correct.
the cost.
We could only go to 15.
Well, you can go to 24, apparently.
What they're doing, though, is doesn't matter to the developers, but what we're doing is we're tail ending the thing right onto the property owners who are going to come in and then have to carry this baby for normally it's built into the price of the house, which is financed by the loan on the house. This way, what we're saying, it'll be separate, so the loan on the house will be made. The people will come in and not only have the loan, but they'll also have this bond against the property when they move into the new development.
Well, now, we
In
should
this particular instance, they have to pay the bonds off before they can file a subdivision map. So the bonds do not carry through onto the house payments itself. There's no direct.
Mr. Bettinger, I'd like to ask, what is the reason for this request? This is certainly
it's
new.
easier financing for the subdivider because this way they have to pay less per year on their assessment. So
Less
it's
1/15 a year payments instead of 1/10 a year. I mean, it's just stretching the money out.
they're not sure the amount of time necessary to fully subdivide all the property that's involved, and they want to spread it over a 15 rather than a 10-year period.
I wouldn't see any objection to this where it has to be paid off again, and I also wouldn't worry about it if the owners involved all want it. In short, they are the ones who are paying for it. I think you could type this up a very complex policy for us to
We
take
could
care of
just
it with.
establish it if it's 100% in agreement with those people being assessed. Now, 99 chances out of 100,
You're not gonna get agreement.
You're not gonna get agreement. This is a very unusual case.
So, I think this is
a
why,
very
that
unusual case.
that when it's done with a stated reason that you're doing it for 15 years, so that if it comes up again with a different set of circumstances, you can go back and say, well, this is the reason we did it in this particular case.
You want an intent on it.
Correct.
Because all participants were 100% in agreement.
On, when we get into the hearing, then we'll be asking a question on a recommendation. Your office will give a recommendation in regards to 10 to 15 years.
No, this is policy.
Well, no, it's an area.
Well, I will.
We know very little about. and I
All
really
right,
don't.
what I will do is restate basically what I've just said for the record in the official meeting. Yes, sir.
But you're not in favor of it?
I don't care
Oh.
one way or the other.
That was
Strong
stated profoundly.
recommendation.
Right. That was strong to maintain my neutral position.
On this unwarranted expenditure.
pointing out the
of public funds.
Expenditure.
I think I'm correct in this, that in 1911 Acts, we have some incidental expenses that are put in there by the city of San Diego, and that would mean that we would be 15 years getting that incidental.
Oh, no, we get it now.
We get it now, huh? Okay.
Like the contractor gets his money.
All right, then it wouldn't cost the city. Are there any other questions on page 1? Page 2.
Item 11 should be filed. The council took that by unanimous consent last week.
All right, we'll file number 11. Are there any other questions on page 2? On this item 9, expenditure of $27,000 out of the gas tax fund for $25,300 bid, is that the
Engineering and contingency.
engineering?
Engineering and contingency.
Page 3.
On 100, Tom, is this on the Crosby Street, crossing Nashville and so on, is this land that if we pave will be torn up for the construction of the bridge within a year or two?
John says no.
On 101, Mr. Manager, I notice this is according to council policy 800-3, and in reading this policy, it's based on the property frontage, 67%, but then the district extends way out beyond
That's
the
correct.
frontage.
This is an extended area assessment district under the council policy 800-3.
If you'll do that one more time.
Assessment district.
Yeah.
Oh, do I have one here?
You have I think most of you have one, yeah.
You want percentages.
Well, this is the start of
No, not
from
this one.
Nautilus
This
was
is
the
correct.
first hurdle, and now we've got all of it. We've got Murray Canyon, Colwood, Tillery, Genesee, the whole series.
This is the second one of the series, that's correct.
And this intention hearing is just that we allow our engineers to draw the district, to establish the boundaries and so on, and then we'll have our feasibility hearing at that time, and people will be noticed in the district, and we'll start our first series of
That's
hearings.
correct.
This is really lighting the fuse, lightly.
I noticed the policy says something about hearings. The engineer will have hearings in the district, and I wonder if he has adhered to the all of the ramifications of this policy.
Well, I assume that's when you get your assessment spread and so on, when you give it to them. There's been any hearings in the area to date?
Some months ago, prior to the time of the acceptance of the petition, there were meetings in the district which had explained it. But nothing, say, in the last 6 to 9 months.
Well, when you had your community meeting, all of the people have to be noticed. How do you go about noticing everybody that's in the assessment district when you have your meeting? The policy states of the meeting?
Yes, the policy states there will be informational meetings in the district.
Following this, though.
But
They don't.
Well, I'm wondering if
Well, there was
it's
no,
following.
well, sure, because this, what you're doing here, it authorizes us to go ahead and prepare the plans. This will determine the cost, determine the assessment for property owner, and it'll be noticed to all of those that are to be assessed.
More important, it'll establish the boundaries on it.
This is correct.
You don't
And,
know what area to...
Well,
so what we're doing is getting basically the two things, getting the area designed, and secondly getting the spread of the assessment.
Between now and the feasibility hearings, there should be community meetings.
They call them in this policy informational meetings.
I just have kind of a feeling the district is already there.
Pardon me?
I just have a feeling that the district is already fixed.
Well, sure it is. Item A is approving plan specification and plat number 3692 of the assessment district. So this is what you're approving, so that we can go to work and determine this.
Well, we'll find out what the response is after this vote today. If we don't have this vote today,
We'll never know.
then we'll never know. And I'd certainly like to know what the happen's going to be, but I have my suspicions. Anything else on page 3?
Getting on.
Page 4? Page 5? Pardon me.
Is Dave Kalinsky going to be here today?
I phoned John Lockwood this morning about 8:15 to find out if nobody had arranged for it, for him to arrange it.
This is on 108.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that is I know it's jumping the gun, but if we know someone's going to be down here, like what's the name of your employee with the team?
Yes,
Dave. He came down and the team was all here, and then we had to give him a mimeograph resolution. And if some of these things are going to go through, I think it wouldn't hurt us to have the frame with the seal and type thing, because it felt kind of funny seeing him handing them a mimeograph resolution, because the final one really looks pretty nice.
Good point.
If Abe is here at 10 o'clock, I think it might be well to take this out of order. It won't take very long.
If the council is in agreement with that, if Mr. Kalinsky is here at 10 o'clock, with common consent, we'll take it out of order and bring it up in front. Special order of business.
I don't know what the manager is nodding his head for.
I was nodding his head to him.
When the conversation first started, you take him out of order.
No, I was nodding to Marty, he was whispering in my good ear.
Page 5.
One last question, Alan.
Oh, excuse me.
On 107 is the change in the policy to allow us to make use of the gas tax fund, Tom? This is in the street widening and the center street. Is this the complete amendment on the trees?
Yeah.
On the tree planting ordinance? And the reason why is this is to allow us, or to spell out how we will start spending some of the gas tax funds, which before could not be used for landscaping.
This is right. Gas tax money is not specifically mentioned in the policy, but the policy indicates that it is council policy to provide this at city expense in certain circumstances in your major select system, which is for gas tax money. Yes, sir.
Okay, for that now.
Correct.
Page 5.
On page 5, the unanimous consent item.
Yes, sir.
Haven't they closed the road already?
Not officially. It requires joint action by the city and the county. It's a county road. The county board are taking action on it today. Our action, in effect, is asking the county to close it without liability to the county, of course, because it's our responsibility.
Now, a man called me up on that, and I argued with him, but I said I would check it out. We have county roads in the city.
Sure. This is not in the city. This is in the county itself. It's actually not within the boundaries.
Is it from
Mission Valley
Village Drive
west
to Friars? Isn't that land? Isn't that American Housing Guild city land?
up above, but the road itself is actually in the county. It's not within our city boundaries, which is the reason it's a county. It's in the county of San Diego. It is not in the city of San Diego.
When we annex land from the county, do we also get the road
Oh, sure,
in the city?
sure. But we haven't annexed that piece. That piece is
No.
actually lies within the county of San
Just
Diego.
the road itself.
Well, there's quite a piece. If you have a city map, there's quite a piece of that whole area of Friars Road, Murphy Canyon, for example. Most
I
of
know
that is not in the
most of that is that strip
and
went up to Daly.
and this same area is also in that whole county island.
Huh.
It is within the county, so it's legally a county road. It's not a city road at all. If we annexed it, it would immediately become a city street. The county does not retain ownership or control of a road once it's annexed to the
How
city.
come I see our people maintaining the road?
Well, we do have a mutual agreement between the city and the county. I'm not sure whether it's involved here, but we do have a mutual agreement between the city and the county. They maintain some of our city streets where it's it's cheaper for them to do it, and we maintain some of theirs where it's cheaper for us to do it, and then by bookkeeping entry, we cross over the cost. It's cheaper to do it that way.
Okay. How long are we talking about the closing here?
Well,
Is that 5 months that they talked about in the resolution?
this is about right, until the end of June. The problem is we have to get all that dirt on the other side, and the north side of Friar Road across into the site of the stadium. And there's no way to keep the road open because it'll be moving earth back and forth constantly. But in the contract, the 5-month contract, the end of June.
I think it would be easier to
First part.
build a, what do you call it, conveyor belt type deal.
Well, I think they just put this stuff in
Well, what this unanimous consent item does is authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with the county for the closing of Friars Road.
That's correct. And the county today will be adopting their agreement subject to our approval of it here.
I think when we get contracted, business may decide it's the cheapest way to do it. They know better than us.
What's
This is the only one.
That's the only reason. Okay.
That's the only reason.
We try to keep these things to a minimum, but every now and then.
I think what we ought to do is we ought to have our normal docket, and then we ought to have our stadium and
Yeah.
consent docket.
Would you pass this down to Councilman Schaefer? This is a unanimous consent item, Councilman, and we've just been having a discussion on this and many other matters. It started at 9 o'clock.
Yes, Your Honor. I explained to the Secretary I was on business with the city from 9 to 9:15, and I could have been here.
City business were you on at 9 to 9?
On Tuesdays and Thursdays, our responsibility is here.
Second the motion.
That's all right, Mike, we've both been told this morning. I want to stay home Thursday.
Don't say it, and you'll get yourself in trouble. You're a hit now.
Carry over from my practice prior to becoming a councilman, and this is the last of the carryover item.
Well, then, all right. Well, if there are no other questions,
I've got a couple of questions that on procedure might take a couple of minutes, but it's starting to happen, and I don't know that I like it, and that is that we're getting a rash of policies given to us, and I think we ought to get together and talk these things over, because I had on my desk three council policies that the procedure seems to be to run around to the various individual council members and say, do you have any questions? And if there are no questions, bingo, it ends on the docket. And since these are, and some of them are rather far-reaching in their guidelines, I would say, for example,
What are the items?
well, one we have one on our hearing procedures.
Which we had 2 conferences on.
You had one on the finished item?
No.
Okay. The one that you're going to, this is the law of the land? Okay. Then we have one on,
Mr. Scheidel, pardon me, we are going to have a conference on this item, but I wanted every councilman to receive this and have an opportunity to look it over before it was put on the council agenda. Conference.
well, all I want to do is be sure that we are going to sit around and talk about these and not have one on the docket say it's a big rush item, because, well, now we've got one on the replacement of an expansion of sewer and water facilities in older areas, and I find a section in here that I have some questions on that gives you an example how far-reaching it might be. Standards shall be financed by the expenditure of surplus funds resulting from the operation of the utilities department. Well,
That's scheduled for December the 23rd, which is Thursday at 8:15.
all of these are being scheduled for a conference, then. Is
Yes,
that right?
sir.
There are no exceptions.
Yes,
All
sir,
right.
I'm making very
The
certain of that.
final one that we will go after. All right, that's
Yes,
all I
sir.
wanted.
And then also,
This is in response to your asking, well, where are all these reports, and we're getting them all to you.
Ahead of the council
Save
conference,
the
Harry.
goodwill among the
Yeah, well, you could go a step further and put the date on them that they're going to be a conference here. I mean, it's got everything but the information.
well, I had to make certain that everybody
That's a
would
good
get
idea.
that.
Okay.
I want to give the deputy mayor a vote of confidence. I think he's doing this.
Well, wait, let's not go
Oh,
over.
just a moment.
Merry Christmas to you, too. Merry Christmas. Somehow or other. If there is nothing else, we shall adjourn. There might be, if there's anything else you'd like to bring up at this time, well, we'd sure give you a chance. Anything else?
Oh, you have your football tickets and I have my Valley City tickets.
Adjourn? And motion to adjourn?
Move
Then move. Second.
Okay.
We're doing this.
For building apartment houses and this type of thing, and the facilities, sanitary sewer facilities and water facilities in those areas are now not adequate to serve the areas, and we are faced with the problem of constructing them and of larger sizes. Now, we've had people ask, well, why weren't they built sized properly in the first place? And Mike can elaborate on this, I think, but actually there has been a continuous increase in the use of water and sewer service by people per capita. This is so because of the many new devices which we use today, like automatic dishwashers and garbage disposals and all the whole series of household appliances that increase use, and the general water consumption, in other words, has gone up per capita over years. In addition, in the old days, evidently they didn't think that there would be the dense type of apartment house development that is now in many cases taking place. And the development certainly wasn't foreseen in this downtown area that has taken place in the past few years either. This is something that is pretty general throughout the entire city. And so in trying to examine how do you finance this thing, you reach pretty an impasse on the basis of doing it in individual areas without creating substantial inequities and without, in many cases, perhaps absolutely stopping development, because the cost per unit then becomes darn near prohibitive. And so we have set out here a policy which we feel will supplement the one concerning undeveloped areas of the city. As council recalls, originally in undeveloped areas of the city, utilities were financed by an area charge, and actually the city then advanced money for the installation of utilities that was repaid and will be repaid over many years of time back. Because of the difficulties of continuing with that type of program, we recommended to council that utilities in undeveloped areas of the city be placed under an improvement district procedure. And this leaves the developer pay the cost of the utility that is levied against the land and goes as a lien against the land. This encourages closer in development and it gets the city out of the business of putting up substantial capital in order that lands might be developed at some distances from the city. This policy, which we presented to you as covering the areas in water and sewer facilities in developed areas of the city, recommends that we use as the first means of income those revenues that are available from our normal income of the departments themselves, the expenditure of any surplus funds resulting from the operations of the departments and the revenues that accrue to them. And then where additional expenditures are necessary to meet the cost of betterments or expansions in the sewer facility system, that it be the policy that council will use proceeds from one of two sources. First, revenue bond issue, or secondly, a general obligation bond issue, the debt service cost of which is met by a pledge of utility revenues. Now, actually, there isn't much difference except that under two, the interest rates would be better from the city's standpoint than under a straight revenue bond issue.
How would you pay the revenue bonds off?
Again, by a pledge of utility revenues. Now, obviously, if utility revenues would have to be increased to meet these types of obligations.
You would, if this policy were adopted and a revenue bond were passed, in effect you would be saying that you'd either increase your sewer assessment charge or you would increase the water rates to generate the surplus.
Right, but your property tax revenue bond issue would not be affected.
I appreciate that, but it would, and frankly I'm in favor of putting it other places on the property tax base, but I was just curious, now, are we in a position to do anything we're in a position to increase the sewer revenue, but we are not in a position to reduce it. Is that correct? Due to our revenue bond obligations on the metropolitan sewer system.
I think utilities, you're thinking more of water utilities.
Mike mentioned sewers.
Both utilities. And we're talking really about a utility of the sewer line.
Let me cover some of the other broad points because I think it'll give you some background to the very questions you're asking. First, there is no question that there will have to be some increases in rates, particularly water, for example. Our raw water cost has been doing nothing but go up. This is something we have no control over. The charges made by the Metropolitan Water District, the cost has increased in the past 5 years. How much, Mike?
It's been $3 per year for the past 6 years.
I mean, started where though? $15 an acre, 17 an acre?
14
an acre foot.
Percentage-wise, what's that?
This $3 then related to $14 is a pretty substantial increase percentage-wise, and this has gone each year. It's now up $27.50.
29 and a quarter at the moment, and goes up $3 July 1st.
So we've gone from $14 an acre foot to $32 by next July an acre foot of water, and this is a basic cost to us and a substantial one in the operation of our water system. In some way, we've got to meet this cost. The only reasonable way to meet it is through rate structure, and so there will, in any case, have to be some rate structure increase. Now, if we attempt to go on the pay-as-you-go basis for betterments and expansion of the system, that means substantial rate increase, tremendous rate increase actually, to try to meet it on a day-to-day basis. It is our feeling that these types of improvements are good for long time periods. Properly engineered water system today ought to be good 40 years
at least
as a minimum figure. Now, it seems to us unwise then to try to meet our present requirements through a pay-as-you-go policy on this type of deal, and that therefore we have recommended that City Council consider the issuance of bonds to meet these problems. And they're severe and they're immediate. I mean, we're going to have to move rapidly. We are surveying, engineering our entire system to see where our most critical areas are and what we'll have to do rapidly.
What kind of figures you talking about?
40 million.
Mr. Shiloh?
This expands a little bit further. There are other things that problems are generated the same way, and I'm curious about them because we're going to have to face them, and they're about the same sort of thing, I would think. For example, your drainage, as areas develop, then the runoff is channeled into drainage systems that were designed not to carry these loads, and so now all of a sudden there are people who have drainage that they've paid for it, and they're getting their floods and so forth because of the undercapacity. Again, just like your water lines have to be improved, your sewer lines have to be brought up to carry the increases, and so should drainage. I guess there's some others too. I can't think of one right now. But what type of policies are we going to be recommending? In short, I think we ought to take a look at this whole thing at once. You don't just solve the one problem. I think that they're all there. Do we have anything on that?
Well, let me say this. I think the philosophy we have on it is that those things which are long-lived should be financed by bond issue. If we have a facility that should have a 20, 40, 60-year life, we shouldn't attempt to meet this obligation today, and it should be one which carries on over the long-term period.
Well, that's not my question, Walter. What I'm saying is a $40 million bond, if this will take care of the sewage, now what, are we going to need another 5 or 10 or 20 to take care of, say, drainage
we were asked for a round figure. We gave you one, and we will.
Water and sewage.
Yeah, we will have a detailed proposal packaged up on this. Now, those problems where we don't meet them through our normal policies on drainage, certainly we're going to have to meet this way. We feel most of them we're going to be able to meet. We have some instances of the situation you mentioned where people did pay for a facility, and because of other improvements now that facility isn't adequately sized. Our policy has been that we don't go back on those people and ask them to pay over again, because this isn't a fair way of doing business. And in those instances, the city will have to finance either directly out of capital outlay or going to bond issue. Now, those we're studying to see what we've got in dollars and cents in, to see whether it's essential if we go on a long-term.
My concern is that I do want to put them in proper perspective, and I like to see all of the problems at once on this sort of thing, because I don't know that I necessarily agree with our drainage policy. Now, there was a bond issue sold on a matching fund basis, and now we've relatively run out of that money. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so now we're sitting in a position with drainage. If we stuck to our same and existing policy, we'd be going to a person saying, now you're going to pay half of it. But in sewer lines, no. This is the concern that I have, that we have two policies that don't have the same standards.
These policies do not conflict. Let me point out the difference. The drainage policy where we go on a 50-50 basis is where a swale or something goes through John Doe's property. Now, if that is put in a conduit, the property is improved materially. As a matter of fact, in some instances he can't even use a property unless he puts the drainage water in a conduit. Now, in that case, it's about a 50. We pay 50%, he pays 50% roughly.
What I'm talking
now,
about.
This is different than that in the street system. In the street system, we will pay it, and we pay only what is considered betterment to property out of as a charge against the property owner.
You're not getting the picture that I'm trying to paint. You improve them in the streets, fine, great. But so somebody has improved their property, or it handles the capacity. And then by addition of greater densities and greater lot coverage and more roofs and more asphalt draining into these streets, then they go down through the swales and private property and render the property useless. Now, these are drainage problems, and they're created by not the people who own the property. And the question I'm asking is, how much of this do we have? And I know we've got some. How much of this do we have, and where is the money coming to take care of it? That's the only point I was getting at. It looks like the same thing, only with drainage. The same problem as creating the same situation, a hardship on properties.
Gentlemen, we don't have an opportunity sometimes to hear from our utility director very often, so maybe Mike Graham would like to expound on this problem.
Well, I feel that Walt has outlined the problem quite adequately as far as our water and sewer facilities are concerned. One additional comment that I would like to make is that the recommendation that additional financing be obtained from either revenue bonds or general obligation bonds, the choice there would normally be based upon the bond market at the time. There have been times when revenue bond issues for utilities have been lower than GOs, although normally the GOs are cheaper. But this would be a choice that would be made at the time the bond package was put together. In either case, the total payback would be from utility revenues. So there's no difference as far as the city is concerned. There would be nothing out of the taxpayer's pocket on that.
Councilman Walt?
One point to make it clear in my mind. We're talking about titleless utility requirements concerning rezoning. You talk about in your letter here, utility replacement concerning rezoning, but the replacement program you're talking about here is a complete replacement program. It doesn't matter whether it comes with a rezoning or whether it doesn't.
We're discussing the replacement and betterment of utility systems in the developed areas of the city, not for the areas that are raw land. Those areas we've
I realize that, but all of the talk and the discussion seems to be centering around rezoning, and that's not
No, it says right here, it says, and such areas under existing zoning, in the end of the first sentence.
Utility requirements concerning rezoning is the title of the conference.
Well, if you read
both
here,
items were covered.
questions have arisen regarding rezoning of such areas and the intensified use of such areas under existing zoning.
So, I just wanted to make it clear that the discussions have arisen out of it, but we're talking about in our policy here, not just the rezoning of an area and then requiring improvements to go in, like that $25,000 off-site improvement in Hillcrest started on. But we're talking about a complete replacement procedure and policy for developed areas.
That's correct, sir.
I would wager that the major dollar investment will be in areas that are presently zoned but are experiencing intensified use, such as your downtown area.
North Forest, La Jolla.
What I get from this is that we're talking about discontinuing, favoring urban sprawl, and moving in to make it possible for the older areas of the city, such as southeast San Diego and east San Diego and downtown, and to do something for them is what I get from this. Now, in that rezoning, I'd like to ask a question. Are you talking about not having the people that own R4 property that has been undeveloped, and they now want to put in apartment houses so that you're not going to ask them to pay except through a revenue bond issue?
That is correct, sir. Our basis of that, as we indicated to you, was this. Well, the one up in Hillcrest, I think, was a pretty good example of the problem. There we asked a property owner who was developed one parcel to put in about a quarter mile of sewer line, as I recall. This is about the right figures. And yet, over a period of 5 years, I think there had been 10 or 12 parcels rezoned in that immediate area. And then if you go back 10 years before that, there were a whole bunch of them rezoned. Now, if the question comes, what is equitable? Do you just take this last chap and say you have to pay the whole bill that was created because over a period of many years, all these parcels developed? And we didn't feel that you could make a reasonable judgment. So we couldn't see how we could make any reasonable judgment in recommending to you who should pay what, because some of this has been spread over time period. And then, as Mike has indicated, in reviewing where our problems existed, the majority of our problems in areas where there haven't been any rezonings, where for many years the property has been zoned multiple family, but developed actually, in most cases, single family, and is now changing to multiple family development for higher use, intensity of use, and as a result the systems will not carry it. Now, we also have the problem that even in some areas where the use has not intensified tremendously, the very nature of the use of water, sewer facilities, increased it till we're reaching pretty much a maximum capacity.
Councilman Hong?
Walter, I sort of concur with this overall policy here, but it's a question in drawing up criteria as to what lines to replace. Have we given that thought? What problems will we incur in that area?
I don't think that will be a problem, because I think what we're faced with there is the utility department analyzing specifically their own operating problems, and this is pretty much of an engineering nature. I mean, we know what capacities we have in the systems. We know whether the systems are becoming to some degree obsolete. We know from our planning people the potential of density of development.
To go with sort of the development of the areas.
That's correct, sir.
Priority.
We would not try to guess what the area is going to do until the pattern starts, and then work right along with them in this development.
Councilman Chattel?
Just to clear up my mind, I'm hearing an awful lot about R4 practice being developed into high density that wasn't. I recall some of the housing projects, World War II type housing projects, that were put in with minimal utilities, and as soon as you plugged in a new electrical appliance, everything blew out and the sewage backed up and everything happened. I'm curious as to really what percentage of the overload is developing from R4 development as against just increased R1 development and the average consumption going from maybe 50 gallons per person to 75 or something like that. I wonder if the real problem is it stands out very quickly when somebody wants to put a 100-unit apartment in, but very well this could have been sopped up by quite a few residential units before this period. Do we have any figures on that?
Well, I can't give you any exact figures, but I think I can put it this way. In local areas, in any one block or several blocks, your change in use from two-family to a apartment building makes the big difference there. We may have had a 6-inch line to begin with, we may need a 10 now, something of that nature. But in your trunk lines, what you speak of is very true. The large interceptors, the general increase in water and sewerage has made the big
You're
difference.
basically saying the stuff that we call, if 2 or 3 square acres were being subdivided, these are the lines that subdivision would be required to put in to attach to the laterals, and these are the replacements.
But where the use has changed drastically, that can change the local requirements, the collector lines, this type of thing. But your large trunk lines is more affected by the general increase.
What are those figures per person? I remember hearing it. How many gallons per person to so many?
Water or
Yeah,
sewage?
water.
Water right now is,
Yeah, water and sewage, yeah.
well, water right now is running about 135 gallons per capita
Per day?
per day.
I've got to bathe more often.
Getting your share?
You're adding to the problem. I'd like to talk about Planned Parenthood at this point.
Let's,
Per person per day.
Yes, that is our average use at the moment, and increasing, we would guess within the next 10 years up to around 150 gallons. The pattern appears to be
Used to be,
100 to 120.
I used to sell water softeners down at
100, not too long back, we used to, planning work, figure 100 gallons a day per person, pretty much standard.
The difference in
let's
sewage.
gentlemen, let's give Councilman Walsh an opportunity.
Basically, what we're saying here then, Mike, is that we're recommending by this policy that improvements in developed areas and in any areas of the city will be on a citywide charge and not on a district charge. Is that what you're saying?
Where the utility lines had initially been installed to then existing standards, yes, any upgrading would be on a citywide charge basis.
And, okay. Then on rezonings, there will not be requirements for, there will not be used as a wedge for changing lines that were up to standard, or what if they were up to standard to the existing zone? Would there be a requirement on the condition of the rezoning to bring them up to standards of the new zone?
No, any upgrading would be at the responsibility of utilities department.
All right, then the next question is, what do you mean by special charges in the policy section where you say that it will be to the extent possible by the expenditure of annual depreciation accruals and special charges required by the rules and regulations of the utility department? What are we allowing you to do there?
There are certain connection charges and frontage charges already provided in the code, which basically require a property owner to pay his share of the original utility installation. If he has not paid that, then at the time of connection, he must pay a connection charge. This is the principal area.
Okay, then the last question is, that the standard shall be financed by the expenditure of surplus funds resulting. Now, what instances is this in comparison to the revenue bond and the general obligation bond method of financing?
Well, at the present time, practically all of our capital improvement is from what we would term surplus funds. In other words, the balance of revenue over operation and maintenance costs. That surplus or the remainder is invested in capital improvements. That would continue to be the case. We would use that first, and then whatever additional is required would be by bond.
Councilman Scheidel.
It looks like we're getting into some sort of a rate increase with this, and obviously so, and I think it will probably be equitable, but there's one thing that I look at. If, for example, you raise your water rate 10% to take care of the bond, this does not affect the homeowner's sewer assessment rate. In short, it's a flat rate unless that is changed. Is that correct? $3.
At the present time, the single dwelling rate is a flat rate.
All right,
not a
but
percentage.
then it throws an exaggerated burden on the commercial user because they're on a flat 10%.
In any rate adjustment of water, we will have to consider the effect on the sewer rates. I'd say, because they do have an interlocking effect.
Because actually, if you raise the commercial rate 10%, then in effect you're raising 11% because you have the 10% sewer charge, right?
This is true.
But this would not, unless, leaving everything the same, except that one raise on the commercial user would be taxed a little higher. I don't know the inner ramifications of this thing and the equity of it, but it is a...
This is right. We would have to look at the entire picture of sewer rates as well as water rates.
Your water rate structure is a sliding scale anyway, based on quantity of usage to some extent.
Councilman Morrow?
I'd like to ask, what is the average life of some of these systems that we're replacing? Do you have any idea there?
The sewer systems that are in the greatest need of replacement are the concrete sewer systems, which in many of the areas have had, they've been in there for 40 to 50 years, but they are well beyond their life. We have numerous breaks and cave-ins. We are not replacing with concrete. Now, the vitrified clay tile lines that we now use have a useful life of, indeterminate, but it's probably 100 years or so. It's just not affected by sewage. In water, we are using asbestos cement pipe, which again has almost an indefinite life.
The old lines again, though.
The old cast iron lines had a rather limited life, 30 to 40 years.
Now, the property owners affected in these areas are not charged will not be charged per se with the replacement of worn out sewer systems. I know.
They will, in a different manner.
On a citywide basis.
Well, the person that's been paid for a new one, for example, and a new track up here, in effect, through either buying his home or whatever it might be, he is then paying through this system, helping pay for the older section to replace theirs.
This is true.
And to pay for any improvements needed to better serve his area, which has happened in many cases. We need large facilities, which incidentally is a cost item from this, in many cases of the trunk lines, which serve an area, and because of change in use or in denser use, we need larger trunk facilities. Now, this can serve wide areas of the city, although not directly in front of the chap's house.
Councilman Scheidel.
I think one thing, Floyd, that you should take into consideration on this equity, I mean, it's true that these people would be paying for something that they are not getting. However, the reverse of that situation has been that subdivisions have gone in to these places that you're talking about, and the city has put in sewer lines out there to serve those communities, and they have not paid for them. It's been paid for by the older areas of the city. So this is one chance where they might, and when I say pay for it, I'm talking about interest rates. This is the chance to get it back. Many of the parts of the newer areas have been going in, and relatively few there. So this is one of those things. The older areas generally stop up the underground replacements, and the newer areas get it on the surface, as it were.
Well, as far as the developed areas, let me point out this, in our estimate at least, is complete equity, because in just about every single person in the city that has sewer or water service at one time paid for the original installation, either when they bought their property, when they bought their house, or however. But somebody had to pay that bill, and when land was developed, the developers paid the cost originally, and the people buying homes then paid that cost. Now we come to a point in time where in large areas of the city the system has to be replaced, and as a result of that, now there has to be some additional spread of cost on it.
Further on Councilman Morrow's question, I can remember a couple of years ago that Mike Graham, the utility director, came before us, and he said that we have invested millions of dollars in new lines out in the outlying areas. And we just cannot do that anymore because the capital investment of the utility department was too great. Do you want to cover that a little bit, Mike? Has that helped?
Well,
has that been helped any?
Well, yes, this was at the time that you made the decision that new areas should pay for their own improvements rather than the utilities department paying for them and trying to recover through area charges. We invested several millions of dollars in one area and have recovered relatively little over the last 6 to 7 years, and this was the reason that one of the basic reasons that you changed the policy requiring the new areas, raw, undeveloped areas, to pay for their own offsite.
We would have had that $3 million to do this had we not done that. How about that? I bet you would have spent it somewhere else.
Thanks.
Is that a true statement? If it hadn't been expanded into an area like
Rancho Bernardo
or some other area, would we have had that money to replace the older area lines?
This is true.
Although we wouldn't have had a way of getting our money back on the older lines. At least this money, and I agree, the older areas have been neglected, sorely neglected. But at least the money that they put in the new areas, we're going to get it back. If we put the same money in older areas...
Exclusive of a little thing called interest. Yeah, that's right. Which means you aren't going to get it back.
And remember, I think we refer sometimes to one development, but this area charge base was all over the city and covered, I guess, Pernilla, Claremont area. It covered all the newly developed areas of this city that has gone up in the past, how many years? 12 years.
Councilman Watts?
Your Honor, if there are no more further questions, I would move that we place the Hedge-Shiloh subsidy for older areas policy on the docket.
I still would like an answer to the question on the drainage, which is the utility, and it's happening. What are you going to do?
We will give you an answer to the drainage. We would suggest that not be included with utilities. It's not a utility department operation. We do this as a general city function rather than utility function.
I have it on the record of the council conference minutes. I'm happy now.
We'll get into it and bring back a proposal to you on that.
If that were to be bonded, it couldn't be bonded under the same bond because it would be paid back by a different source.
Councilman Hall.
This policy which we're about to adopt, is this replacing any policy, Walt, or we've never had any?
There's not been a policy on this, and this is why we've been kind of at loose ends when you've had some of these problems come before you, because the direction is varied on this.
This policy replaces a previously bad practice.
I think that's correct.
Well, I'd like to ask a question, Mr. Manager, and that is this. If this policy is adopted by the council, will we no longer hear that in a rezoning situation that the engineer is requiring that person getting the rezoning would have to pay for the bigger lines?
Well, I think we have to assume that we're going to have a bond issue passed before. In other words, this won't mean a thing until a bond issue is passed, because the engineer could say, you don't have to pay for it, rezone your property any way you want. But we got to look to where's the money coming from. So this policy will not be implemented and cannot go into force until we have a bond issue.
It affects the rezoning, Ivor, in that even with the bond issue passed, we'll have this priority schedule that will be set up, and if we couldn't rezone a land that would drastically affect any system until that system came up in its priority to be redeveloped, we'd have to change priorities around even with the bonding money. At least that's what I would foresee happening.
Well, the priority I would guess, would be dependent upon the ability of the engineering department to design this, because it wouldn't be done by city forces. It'd be put out to contract, and therefore the the bond money would be available as fast as we could get the improvements designed.
So this brings about one interesting question, though. We adopt the policy. We don't know, for example, what are the present accruals for surplus that you have available that are mentioned in the policy?
They're set forth in our CIP.
Well,
they're, as you know, going on a downhill
okay,
slope.
but there are two things. There's a curve for the deficiencies, in short, the amount of construction that's going in, and also the accruals that we have. Now, there's a crossover, and from when that happens, Mike don't have the money, and so here we're going to be sitting in the zoning hearing, as Alan mentions. The developer isn't going to be required to do this, but the city can't do it, and so you still got the flooding sewage. Now, what happens with this situation if the bond issue isn't sold up to a certain point? It probably wouldn't pass for what? As fast as we could do it would probably be effective, next summer sometime?
Well,
okay.
We've given some thought to that, and actually on the single instant of rezoning, which has been the greatest problem for us, we can normally handle that. One unit is normally not going to overflow it. Now, once in a while, this may be true, and if it is, we're going to have to tell the Planning Commission that the facilities there simply will not handle it, and that it is proposed under bond issue that some of this be done, and it might be a year before it's done. Now, I don't think that situation is going to arise often, but it might very well arise.
The difference in the deficiency, I still don't have an answer on this as to against the accruals. What does it look like?
Well, within a year to a year and a half, we will be in serious financial trouble. But for, I would say, at least the next year, we can handle all normal, what I consider small rezonings, 1 or 2, 3, 4 lots, that type of thing. We can handle that, even if a replacement is needed. We can still handle it. If you take a area-wide rezoning, this is another problem.
Well,
and we've got to
then we get into a difficulty.
In effect, without a bond issue, however, and you use these reserves, these are the same reserves that you probably would use for emergencies now, like a flood washout of lines and so forth. And so if we depleted these, theoretically tomorrow, and then you had some unusual deterioration of older lines, and this is very expensive, isn't it? Your program for replacement of older lines, that will continue?
Yes.
And you don't see any problems with this?
For the next year to year and a half, we can handle this type of thing.
And there won't be any problems to rezonings?
Not unless you have the large area-wide rezoning of hundreds or thousands of acres, then that could be a major problem.
Let's just talk about, for example,
but
like downtown La Jolla.
There's no major rezoning contemplated there.
But you have but the use,
intensified
use, which is covered in this policy, so bingo, you're overloaded.
It is covered in this policy, and we can meet it at the rate it is going for the next year to year and a half.
Okay. One of our problems in this, and we've had this question posed to us a number of times, is without some of the development that's taken place, would we have an overloaded system? The answer has been yes, because a few instances of development there didn't create the problem for us. The total development in the area there created a substantial problem which we're going to have to meet.
The only problem I was looking at is, sure, the problem is there, and if a bond issue is passed, there's no problem. When is the problem going to be created in between? And you've answered the question.
Councilman Morrow, I believe you have something.
Well, I was thinking when you talk about previously developed areas, when you simply say previously developed areas, even though there's no development on it, we call it previously developed areas simply because we have systems that have been placed in there?
If the utility systems were placed according to standards at that time, we would consider it as a developed area, assuming that the landowner had paid for those systems. Now, I did want to make one comment. Somebody mentioned these small rezonings. The question was, we wouldn't hear any more requirements for utility lines. We wouldn't unless there hadn't been lines placed in the area at the time. We do have a few isolated areas where utility lines just hadn't been put in originally,
and we would still require the installation of adequate utilities. Because we do have
By the landowner.
reference here that where the utilities have been placed according to existing standards. That is the only exception.
In East San Diego, there are many properties that have been rezoned or have been zoned in the past many years ago to R4. Now, a lot of them haven't been developed to R4. They're beginning to happen now because a lot of people are becoming interested in the in-city property. Now, on those, in East San Diego as an example, what happens if all of those people go ahead and put up 8 units on their lot where now there is 1, and they're not having to request any rezoning?
We anticipate we can meet this for, say, the next year. And I don't
And beyond that next year, then, it would demand a bond issue.
additional funds.
Additional funds.
Bonds or...
So in adopting that policy, what we're doing is if we adopt this policy, we're encouraging in-city growth.
There'll be more for that, I think.
Okay. Now, is there any other councilman that has a question?
Question on the motion.
Was the motion seconded? Mr. Walsh made the comment and the motion that this hitch saddle deal for older areas. I don't think you really meant that, because all of the councilmen, I'm sure, are interested in the discontinuance of urban sprawl. You want to...
I don't think that's the intent of this policy.
Oh, that's it.
I'm not voting for it on those bases.
All right.
I don't really
Yeah,
know why I'm going to vote for it.
this policy, previous direction given by council to us, I think cancels that, and where you said we shouldn't use area charges, but the land ought to pay for development. And that is being followed and has been followed for 2 years now, a year and a half.
Has Mr. Walsh's motion been seconded?
Your Honor, I just might point out now that the sewer mirror expert just walked into the room now, and he might have some comments on our new policy. Wasn't Burl involved in the rezoning with the sewers and the mirrors?
You know, an engineer's opinion is a great deal like an attorney's opinion. They don't agree.
All right. We have a motion and a second to order this policy to the next docket possible. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Your Honor?
It'll be on the docket.
One further question on the Utilities Director, Mike. Has there been any proposals for, similar to New York, for hazardous duty pay for any of our sewer maintenance employees?
That's taken into consideration by the Civil Service Commission.
The reason I asked is I came across an article that we talk about our problems here. In New York, supposedly one of the problems they have is that the request for hazardous duty pay by the sewer employees has been brought about by, over the years in the Everglades, they have these little gators in wooden crates, and they're shipping them, all over the country. And in New York, they were flushing them down the drain. And they've had instances where men have been bitten and attacked by 8 and 12-foot alligators in the sewer system
We've
in
caught
New
them
York,
here.
and they don't know how extensive it is.
Well, I had an alligator elimination program.
We caught one down here by Mission Bay between 101 and Marina Boulevard, about 8 feet long. A policeman caught it about a year ago.
That's one of the fringe benefits.
Oh, that's a fringe benefit.
All the arguments for that one, thank you.
The list is getting longer.
So they get increase for arresting an alligator.
Follow your main society on dock.
Are we on the docket now?
Ma'am?
Are we on the docket now?
The mayor is here now, and like to give a speech to the mayor about
unanimous consent thing going around, and before I sign it tonight, ask what the immediately is, since you can't get to it anyway till Monday at the very earliest.
This, it is immediate. It's imminent danger of collapse.
You mean you're going to start on it?
Yeah, today. As soon as that's approved.
how is the job coming along, Tom?
Well, we haven't done it yet, but it's.
What is, what's it about?
As soon as it's adopted, we're calling them to move on it.
Retaining wall that's falling down apparently.
Real danger of start on that an hour
Parking lot of Alwood Park.
Correct.
I bet you've got crews out there waiting.
Mayor, we do.
We'll take an hour.
We'd like to have this taken out of order, item number 1 at 10 o'clock if we can.
This comes from the golf course at Vacation Village and the parking lot at Alwood Park. They'd like to be legitimate.
Maybe you should explain it to the whole group.
Well, it's coming around with pictures.
Your Honor, on Tuesday, I was appointed by members of the council, the committee, who wanted to get Mr. Morrow to the council meeting on time.
And you may.
I want to report the success of our committee's efforts in tomorrow to figure out kind of date.
But where were you?
I was on official business. I was extending the warm regards to the council, to the Park and Recreation people at the park.
I didn't know we gave you that duty.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, we did, and they were very appreciative. These are people we don't see every day like we do our regular employees, because they're out on the beaches.
We don't see much either. Why don't you show up?
Yeah.
It was worth 10 or 15 minutes to go.
We would
How
prefer.
many votes?
65.
A lot of people might think they should do that.
You represent the city at large, don't you? Some of them live in the county, though, Mike. I mean, better take an inventory before you go to one of these things after this.
They're tickled to see a live council.
They'd be more tickled the other way. You misunderstand them, I'm sure.
Shall we go on?
They all asked for a raise, actually.
Yeah, you'll learn.
I thought I was Santa Claus. They all wanted a raise.
This rehearsal will bring my TV cameras up.
I'll make a request. We'll have a big laugh. I have a question on item 2. It's a hearing, I realize that, but as to what it says. At the very end, it states here in the bottom note that any future 1911 acts all within 2 years, an ordinance has been prepared for C1A zoning. What's this all within 2 years? Suppose it don't happen, then what happens? The guy's not going to oppose the 1911 Act within 2 years, but after 2 years, is he, or is it mandatory that this goes in, or what happens? What's that say?
No, the 1911 Act agreement, if that's consummated by the property owner, and he files the subdivision map, he can get the rezone. It's all that.
But if the 1911 Act does not go through, and he can't sell his neighbors, et cetera, then his rezoning would not go through in this case, is that it?
The agreement on the 1911 Act merely indicates that he will not oppose such 11 Act when it comes to pass. This could come sometime after the
In lieu of improvement. Well, I appreciate what I think you're trying to do, but it says all within 2 years. Now, I would read this, and if the agreement was this way, that if it didn't happen 2 years, it lets them off the hook. Now, I just want to know what kind of rules we're going in with is all.
I think the all within 2 years refers just to the signing of an agreement, as is mentioned here.
Plus the installation of the fire hydrants and sidewalks.
That's right. If he does,
All of these things.
if he fulfills all of the requirements asked of by the departments on the rezoning, and one of the requirements is that he sign this waiver of opposition to a 1911 Act, regardless of when it would ever come by his property while he's still the owner. And if he happens to sell the property, transfer ownership after he gets his rezoning, why is that binding?
It follows the property.
It does? Is that true, Mr. Attorney? When the owner of this property would sign an agreement that he would not oppose a 1911 Act, and then he sells the property to someone else, is it binding and following?
It is not, Mr. Scheidel.
Okay. See, you learned something this morning. So, as long as you know what you're getting into, fine.
Well, now, we've had these before, and they've been ruled they did.
No, they were not enforceable. I even wrote it down right here, questionable again. This came up before.
There are pious expression of intent on the part of people to build these as guides that they, as long as they can afford it, turn out to be turncoats.
Yeah, but the
Well, the
only
guy who
other-
buys it didn't make any agreement.
But then the only other thing, though, as a further impetus, what we should do is make an official record so that the engineering department would know that any time this 1911 Act did come up, that this were brought out in a hearing, say that the new owner reversed himself, that we at least have some knowledge of record that at the time of the rezoning,
This is what we do, correct. Also, it does put a new owner on some notice that the word else with job, and the other guy was a bad guy.
the restriction, or is there any?
Even if it were, it could be a covenant running with the land enforceable.
We have covenants and deeds and a lot of other instances, and it seems real strange that there should be some way that some notice could be on the title, so that even if it's unenforceable, but at least a person buying a piece of property sees that they're
Could record. We do record these, don't we, John? So the instrument is of record. It will be picked up in the preliminary title report, and the note will be made of it. And the guy does buy it knowing it's there. He goes to a lawyer. The lawyer will say, "Don't worry, they can't enforce it."
okay.
Can you
But
put
it does go with the
You can't make a personal covenant, a covenant running with the land, enforceable against the land.
how about
This is
easement?
a personal covenant. An easement is a stated property. But this doesn't rise to the dignity of an estate's property. The law of covenants running with the land is very narrow and extremely technical, and you just can't create instruments in the state and land.
That's the same thing like on a title in regards to possibly Caucasian and different things, that even on your policies that it may state that you can only sell to, or that people can only be living there, can be Caucasian. Something's been ruled out by the courts, yet it continues to appear on your PR in different areas.
Time and time again, sure.
You can't even self-impose a deed restriction on yourself when title changes.
How many times ago?
Yeah, so get on to the docket. We got a big question on 945. Get your Marcel on page 2.
Your Honor, on number 7, Mr. Manager, it says something here about a pole line, and does that mean that we're going to put in new telephone poles? And if we are, how about the consideration of underground?
We have checked this with the gas electric company. There are existing poles already within the area that these are being moved to. So it in effect is not a new installation in an area. There would be an extensive cost to underground the existing poles that are in that area. At the present time.
We will have underground to the stadium itself.
That is correct. This is substantially outside of the stadium area. The existing pole line is right within the site. This is being moved over to Old Murphy Canyon Road, substantially away from the stadium site area.
But we're not going to have any poles surrounding this, Mr. DeKirby says.
Correct.
Thank you.
This fence, no poles.
On 10, you mentioned in the bid on this that of these there were something like 5 that complied with all the specifications. You also throwing out those 5?
Yes, because it's impractical to award just to a few of the towing companies. So they shouldn't be awarded. The entire area should be awarded at one time. And there were only 5 of them complied in all regards to both the planning requirements and the police requirements in terms of the specifications. what we're recommending is that we re-advertise, and we will then, one of the changes in the re-advertising is they'll have 10 weeks in which to comply. This will give them time to get it cleared through planning in those areas where they do not have planning clearance for this type of operation.
Well, now, it costs a bit, probably not as much in this as some others, but it costs to submit a bid, and it looked like these five who did it, and it was correct, and did it in good faith, should not be penalized because of the rest of it.
Well, in our opinion, because of the fact that we're dividing the city up into all of these 15 areas, that it would not be practical to give awards to just certain areas, because if you remember, this has been a long-standing problem.
All right, I'll agree with you that far, but must these people also resubmit? And is it now public knowledge what their bid was?
We see no other alternative.
I kind of agree with Helen. I mean, I don't understand the hazard. Suppose you award the contract tentative to all of the others being bid, but I would hate Mike Dickens to put in a bid, lay all my cards on the table, and do all the things that I was supposed to and be penalized for those who didn't. Now, all I want to know is the city, you explain to me how the city is being put into jeopardy if we award these contracts pending the others being left.
Well, let me have that list. Dave Wood's the one who's worked on this. Actually, going down the list here, the only two of them complied with both the planning and the police requirements. Only two. In other words, there are some that complied with the planning requirements but did not comply as far as the police department requirements are concerned. So in terms of the five that are involved, you had only two of all of them complied with the planning department requirements. The balance in terms of police requirements, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Even the two then, just say the two. What the heck with the other three of the five? I mean, I just
see any problem doing that,
What does this do to you? I mean,
No, I see no problem, particularly to you, Dave.
I see one problem that could be resolved, and that is we make minor changes in the specifications to clarify them, to make equitable adjustments to the district. I don't think there'll be any objection on any. Is there any objection to the two to the continuance? I should think that if they agree to possibly defer going into the contract until the rest of the bidding had been accomplished and everything went into the contract process at one time.
Well, then you're saying it could be that these two areas would still be held as is, and the bidding would be on the rest.
Well, what he also is saying is that they would, if we did not rebid those, that they would have to agree to the slight modifications of the specifications.
And the effective date would not be until we awarded the other contract.
Fine.
Because otherwise, you could develop a system where a couple of guys are the only bidders, and they'd say, well, let us not bid, we'll hold the whole city up, because these fellows, unless we're in 100% agreement, they're not going to go, and this looks like to be a real problem to me. We're giving them notice now, they comply, they can get in the game.
Scuttlebutt, I hear a couple of these bids are pretty out anyway.
There are three of those. There are three. There's one that apparently said no, but it is now clarified it is. Why don't we do this on the basis you want to hold it up, and we can redo it on the basis of those which in fact comply and get their agreement before we advertise, or we'll go ahead and approve 10 with the understanding that those which do comply we will not advertise for. You can do it either way. Either hold it up. If you want to hold it up another week,
hold it up.
Hold it up a week. I'll bring back a report indicating that those that do comply and get their concurrence before I come back next week on it.
And would you also include in your report the definition of a
It really is to make it easier for them to meet the specifications. Is what,
Is that a list of the bidders?
no modification of our policy, just an administrative change. Page 4. I'll have one question on 9. What happens that we can only get one bid on this sort of? It's the only manufacturer of this equipment. This is it's the counter which produces a tape for a computer. Okay. And it's the only one that's made, and it's the same price as the motorcycle. Or motorcycle. All right. Right.
Page 4. On 101, Tom, would there be any problem in continuing this, say, for 30 days?
Yes. Because his contract ends as of the 31st, and there'd be no way in which we could pay him.
Well, I know Alan has ideas, and I've got ideas in regards to the whole field of industrial development. And I would rather see us establish a conference to discuss the possibility of either enlarging the department, enlarging the amount of income we've got going there, something that might change the total structure on it. And I know that when we first came on the council, we just about every year, this came up real fast, I had no idea it was coming up until I saw it on the docket yesterday, is the review by, I'm sure Floyd and Mike have some questions on mine on what is the area of responsibility and the individual and so on. Like we asked the question, what do you show with your money type of a deal.
I think this matter, we have to at least a couple of weeks to look it over. Frankly, not finally what to suggest. It is a 30-day cancellation. This is no problem there.
Well, we go through the same thing every year, and we get the same story every year, and it still comes up on the docket a week before it's supposed to happen. So, get around here, let's face it, get them there ahead of time.
I would suggest that for the advantage of the entire council, as soon as possible, that we have a conference with the industrial board, the one that Mr. McKinnon.
Not too long ago,
we have
that they're coming in with a recommendation that the commission be reorganized.
Well,
whatever
it is, that I think we ought to hear their recommendation, because I know they had public hearings which you and I attended, and they may have some points, I don't know, but I should think that since that's of the greatest interest to the people, I think, industrial development, that it would be very wise if the council would like that set up. I'd set up a conference with the industrial board so that we could meet with them and see what they have to say.
I might mention in relation to the Industrial Development Commission, their last meeting, which I think was last week, they did recommend unanimously the renewal of Mr. Jensen's contract for one of the year. And as the mayor has pointed out, there is a cancellation clause within the contract, and this is a normal renewal. I was not aware that there was any question being raised as far as the renewal of the contract was last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, this year's different.
Well, the only
I have one question. I noticed we're changing the travel expenses of $1,200 and adding that onto the. What's involved? Does that mean he traveled less, or no? What it means is that you have a peculiar thing here in which the contract is on a calendar year, but the budget's on a fiscal year. The money has been budgeted for the fiscal year July 1st to June 30th, but the contract is from January 1st to December 31st. We are recommending to the council that Mr. Jensen receive a modest increase in salary, which he hasn't for 4 years. Now, but we don't and you still have the money budgeted. So what I'm saying is that the travel money will be added to the contract in the next year's budget. We're not changing actually what he's doing, but simply the money has to come in later in terms of the contract.
The reason why I would not be, why I would have hesitations in regards to, well, we got the 30-day cancellation. It's not that we want to cancel a contract, but as it happens, as Harry points out, every year we say, okay, well, we're going to really sit down and look at the situation and do a breakdown and say our system. Next time we see it again is a year later when it comes back on the docket. And I don't know, I have some quite a few questions. I don't think now's the time probably to get involved in regards to the travel expenses and whether or not there should be an increased budget, whether or not there should be increased staff, methods of funding, increasing the budget, just a whole bunch of things. And tied into it is the contractual agreement with Mr. Jensen.
It's pretty long. We've got some other things to do this morning.
Well, you know, in not directly related to this, but and I think one of the things that bothers me on this again is that they hit us with a time spacing us now, and this will happen again next week with our workable program, because if I'm not mistaken, that expires the 31st of December.
No, that's no problem. We've gone past that. We've gone past that date before on the workable program.
But each time it hits us, it's one of these things. Do it yesterday.
No, I don't think so. We haven't done that on the workable program.
All we're saying is these things that should be ahead of time, the manager's tickler system is not working.
Well, no tickler was put in there. Well, this contract, no one has indicated to me that there was any question on the part of the council as far as Jensen's contract.
Well, they sure do now.
You just tickled me.
You know that there
Last
are...
night, sure, but this is already on the docket.
But there are always questions.
Yeah.
Okay. I asked a question on 102. Don't we have...
Mr. Deputy Mayor, do we receive...
Mr. Mayor is conducting the meeting.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do we receive reports from time to time on what Mr. Jensen is doing or what the industrial development people are doing? I haven't received any communication from either of them other than Christmas greeting. Council had a meeting with the board about 2 months ago.
These fellows weren't here then.
Well, this is the reason I proposed it's really good, so we can get in contact with
Well, Your Honor, this is a very simple thing. You don't have to have a committee for this. Just bring it up a month ahead of time. I can't recall 1 year that we've had where we haven't had a review and a checkup and so forth. And I think the council conference minutes are going to show this to anybody who wants to check them. So this is not unusual or anything else, and I don't think a committee would solve this.
I have a question on 102. Are we ready?
The attorney just made a suggestion on 101. If there's a matter of time involved in here that you want the present contract could be extended to 30 days.
If you can get into effect to resolve the other.
All right, extend. That sounds like a good idea.
The 30-day continuance is possible. I think so, sure. Within that time, could the deputy mayor schedule a conference to get an idea of the...
The mayor will take this time.
The mayor will?
Yes. The mayor is still chairman of the council.
Well, deputy mayor usually schedules a conference.
The mayor will schedule a conference.
Well, I wouldn't want to take any of your power away, Your Honor, so I agree with you, and maybe the deputy mayor could help out like he's done in the past.
Does it take council action now to extend this contract 30 days? We must do that this morning.
Crank up a quick council for it.
Now can I ask 102? How come we don't have an easement there?
Well, this, you may recall, this is the one at Unimart where we brought this in a report that the sewer line had been built under Unimart, or the Unimart's been built over the old sewer line where we had no easement at all, and that sewer line had plugged, and we had to go in on an emergency action to build a new sewer line, most of which is being paid by Unimart. In doing it, the records had indicated we could get an easement on certain lines. When we got out to do the job, found we had to move it slightly. When we move it, we had to build another manhole. We didn't have move the line.
An area which we did not have an easement.
That's correct. We now have the easement on the line. It was an emergency job.
Well, this is says to remove and replace and all that sort of jazz. Then there will be nothing over this new easement except the...
That is correct.
And hereafter, if anything happens, it's replaced and removed and so forth at their cost.
Correct. Well, this is at their cost too. $4,000 of this $5,000 is their expense. We did the engineering and contingency. On 105.
Then the increase is not...
Is ours because...
engineering and all that sort of jazz.
105, what happened here? Delay in installing telephone. Telephone company did not get in time. So, and this wasn't their contract. Join the retirement system, Jack.
Play 106.
Yes, 106 is a 1911 Act that's been in existence for some time, and we've been having trouble getting the property. We had a severe drain problem during a recent storm, and we must move immediately on this to acquire by condemnation these particular parcels so we can get the 1911 Act going. This is charged in the 11 Act? Yes, sir. Do they know it? Does this affect their 10%? Okay.
Will there new policy apply in this case, or will this be to that point? Prior to that, the new policy of credits for those who contributed.
Apparently, I've just been advised that apparently this is our part of it because it's the drainage part and not the 1911 Act. Is that right, John?
We'll construct the drainage facility out of city monies, but the right of way will be paid for by the district.
Now, will our new ordinance and policy be into effect prior to the time this is assessments are made? That those who have contributed property will be given credit?
Right, this is in existence now, I believe it's passed this.
Well, it was an ordinance in 31 days to run. It hasn't been a month ago that we put this in effect, am I right?
Yeah.
Was by resolution? Oh,
Did I understand the city engineer to say that the drainage would be paid by the city?
I think that's...
It's not a half-half deal.
Instead of what?
Well, is the city contribution on the drainage or on 50/50? It is a city contribution.
Well, what's sometimes points we got here tonight talking about drainage in that 50/50 program. Why would we do 100% as opposed to the normal 50/50? I believe it's a major drainage facility that cuts diagonally through. Now, the district will pay for those costs of drainage facilities within the road.
Oh, I love it.
Private or be acquired easily, the city needs to visit.
Is this for acquiring the easement, or is this for, say, putting in a major facility, either the open concrete trough or the big pipe? See, this confuses me because almost all of our other I mean, in most other cases, no matter how big the ditch is, such as in Market Street, some of the other, down in Euclid and so on, where we have the tracks participating on a 50% basis with the city, even though it's a major drainage, say, taking care of a whole area, then in this instance, the city is in because it's a major drain. I'm sure that they could have fallen. Choice. Well, then I guess my question should be, what constitutes a major drain? Size of pipe?
Flow? Area covered? In short, where does a citizen, when they've got the problem, come in and say, when does this happen or not happen? What are the standards? Because I've had it both ways. I touched on it this morning too.
Let me check into this.
Okay, because the question comes to mind is that in the beginning of the river, where they start the drainage, a guy may have an easement and just put in a 12-inch drainage pipe, and he's required to split with the city. But then you get the same guy way down at the other end of the line that they come through and take a 40-foot wide easement, and then they put in a 72-inch pipe, and then he's got to pay half of a 72-inch pipe. At some point, there must, I mean, then it sort of becomes uneconomical for the guys down here to participate, so we end up without the drainage program. Your Honor says there was a choice. In Choice, we went into it, so I guess the thing is, what is the cutoff point?
Speaking of, you were talking about a river, we've got some pictures of this Elwood situation.
I've got some pictures I'll show you too of another river.
Your Honor, I had trouble from this legal description of locating where this eminent domain proceedings would take place, and I would appreciate it if the city clerk,
we've got a map right here,
would say the vicinity.
Well, here's the map.
Emerald Hill. Well, it would help you on the...
Yeah, on the docket. I can't tell whether it's in La Jolla or without going to the city tax collector's office, a county tax collector's office. See, I don't see that till this morning.
The clerk was on vacation, actually, is what happened on this one. This is 51st Euclid Hilltop Drive.
Up in Emerald Hills, isn't it?
No.
West just the foot that steep.
Yeah.
River bottom. I always wondered what was going to happen down there.
Could this be done in the future?
Part of the Volkswagen that floats.
Bill, could you do that on
10...
I usually do this on back here,
just the rotation, what street, Cross Street or...
On 108, could I get a kind of a quick review to refresh my mind on that? Yes, we have a map of that on 108. This was a property that was sold in May of '64, but it was in two parcels. They paid the first amount, which is, they bought all of the 50-some acres. They paid for this part last year plus 20% of the money for this one, and this is the picking up of their second option on this land. This was one that we had out to bid, was it? It was auction.
That was the Lloyd thing from...
What is it normal for where you pay?
It was signed from an area.
We don't want to wait until...
Yes, sir.
Is it normal to pay brokerage commission, say 5% worth of sum of $13,830 for an engineer and a firm?
Yes, because they are a real estate broker also.
Oh, they are the broker in question.
That is correct.
I don't understand the 5% commission too on the purchase price or the sum. Does that figure out to be 5%?
Exactly the same amount, yeah. 5% of the $276,600 is $13,830. Why do it with one number when you can do it with 8? Yeah. Legal language. 5%, which means $13,830. skip over 107, I would be certainly putting on half of the civic center. No, we sold our share of the old civic center to the county for the sum of $3,300,000 to be paid in 3 payments of $1 million and a final payment of $300,000. This is the final $1 million payment. There will be one more payment made for $300,000 this time next year. Imagine this is very profitable investment for the people over the years. Yes, sir. The county got a real buy. And they shared the entire civic center in 1937 cost $3,300,000 approximately to build. Well, I don't know, with inflation we got enough out of it. Well, of course, land was included, and that's what really made the difference.
On 109.
109?
There were several little bits of property that were left north of the Nautilus right away.
This is the last one.
Okay.
114. I don't have that thing here with me. Have we got an extra copy? This is the ordinance. Is this the ordinance that you have prepared as to take care of the 1911 Act for the flood channels?
Yes, this ordinance will get Bird Rock and will include for all those areas where the federal or other agency has to be the controlling agent in the execution.
I have a question to add to how far this might go or might be used. I can understand it's designed for the flood channel. What would it do for assessment districts and participations of other types, such as canyons adjacent, unused canyons adjacent to property that might want to be acquired and spread, or in a case of similar to La Jolla, where maybe the property might want to be acquired to keep big buildings from going up and spread. Will this work in that, or have you checked it out?
It's not intended to. That will cover that kind of area.
Okay. I would like to see one like that, and I know you can look it up.
A lot of problems. Is this basically the
Over here, huh?
Basically the 1911 type of thing. More flexible.
This is almost 1911. All respects to the except one, and that is someone else.
And
another public
do the engineering, let the contract supervise the work. This ordinance. For the Corps of Engineers, went out to contract supervise the work and construct the project. This ordinance enables them to participate financially. We added incidentally, after our last meeting with the Bird Rock thing, a paragraph over here on page 12 called Urgency Proceedings. We think this paragraph will enable the Bird Rock thing to go on schedule without waiting for the completion of assessment proceedings. Which is to say, you asked the last time we talked at Bird Rock, can we get this thing kicked off without going through all the hooks, all the hearings and so forth? We think we can, and we can throw this paragraph in to permit it.
Actually, I realize it's essential on this one, and since we've had our preliminary hearings, certainly expressing our intent, and it was a mechanical deal, but I would hate to see this section left in there.
You'd hate to see it left
after it takes care of this problem.
What?
Because really, I mean, we're pre-committed on that one, and let's face it, we are. And this laying in the books would tend to allow a pre-commitment continually, and I know we're not going to have a Bird Rock thing again where we're going to have a hearing under 1911 and then scratch it off and then start fresh with this. But with this particular section in there, somebody might look at it in the future and say, well, it was the intent of the council to go ahead and let these contracts have somebody else engineer it, and then we'll hold a hearing.
I would rather see it leave it in for this kind of project.
I said leave it in, but I said I don't want to see it in there after this. This is my personal feeling. Next year, next July. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, but on the other hand, take this thing that's in Tijuana now, it might well be extremely desirable for the city to participate financially in some emergency project that had to do with areas such as that. You might find it a very useful and valuable tool to participate in an emergency situation.
But in this case, then you just forget your hearing.
What?
I think the chance of that coming up is extremely rare.
It could be, I don't know.
And I do feel that this could be used and used and used and become a habit, and
misused.
Right.
Well,
right. I don't think it's misused in this case because we have in fact had our hearings. But on some of these other things, emergencies are going to come up, and if we tool all of our ordinances for emergencies, I think we're going to have a conglomerated mess.
Harry's thinking of future unscrupulous counsel. Things such as participation with the Tijuana, wouldn't it come under the emergency powers the council already has, perhaps?
Not if you're going to spread an assessment on lands to be benefited.
What he's saying is that, for instance, in the Tijuana, we're not thinking, I'm not thinking, no, I don't think anybody else is, but assuming that part of that problem could be solved by spreading an assessment on the 26 parcels of land that would be inundated and if something didn't go, this will come up on the flood channel, and this ordinance without this, normally they are going to participate, and I agree with this 100%, but on an emergency basis, it's so rare, it just doesn't seem like good legislation to me to have it in there.
Yeah, of course, we've said it's required to be commenced in advance of the completion of the proceeding. This really contemplates that you've got to start the proceeding, and this means that you commit the proceeding, not the administrator. But this says that you can squeeze the 90-day thing down to 30 days, or even a shorter period for any year participation.
Once you sign the contract, somebody's committed.
Oh, sure.
And now what we're saying is after somebody's committed for it, now we're going to find people to share this with, and we're going to have a fair hearing and a fair trial before we're going to give the sentence, but
And this contemplates in the course of that hearing on the assessment, you might decide that it's inequitable to spread the assessment on the land and pick up the tab yourself.
Let me ask another question then on this. Assuming that this is passed today, it'll be 31 days before it's in effect, right?
Yeah.
All right. Can the city manager, knowing that if this is passed today, or the city clerk,
I'm sorry, it's 7 days.
38.
We're introducing it.
Well,
7 days
after next, right. Start the proceedings for notification on hearings in that area and have the city engineers do what was necessary. My main concern is the fact that we're going to look in an uncomfortable position if we're holding hearings while the contracts are already let and so on. And that's the February date you gave us last time?
No, they were advertising for February, Jack. The award would be in the spring. Well, this is something that we are to check with the attorney's office, as we assured you we would, to do everything that can be done, even though the ordinance has not yet gone into effect. As much as the attorney will permit us to do, will be done. Just as soon as you introduce the ordinance, as of today, we'll start whatever proceedings the attorney will permit us to start on it.
I think Harry's brought up a good point, and I guess maybe next July or August, we'd like it to consider whether or not. But I think everybody's in agreement that we need it now.
We want to think very hard about taking it out of the ordinance when in fact the bonds issued and sold, if they are issued and sold on this thing, would be issued and sold on the basis of this paragraph. And it might leave us in a difficult position if you amended the paragraph out of the ordinance, leaving the bonds floating without the support of the law on this thing. I'm not sure that that's necessarily conclusive. I wouldn't like you to think you can amend it out without letting us take a very close look at it.
You mean to say if we took our 1911 Act ordinances that are involved, and if we were to make any change on them whatsoever, that the bondholders could say, no, you can't do that because we bought the bond?
That's true at all. All I'm cautioning you is that don't go down the path you're thinking you can without any difficulty in Mendocino. Maybe you can.
By the way, Jack, your standpoint is because we can move ahead, this is real fine, but the final action is an action of default by the citizens to exercise the referendum on the ordinance to make it effective.
That's this ordinance.
Any ordinance, any 31-day ordinance.
Yeah, but what we're talking about is the hearing to comply with this ordinance. And if the citizens, this will cover all ordinances, if they want to referend this, fine. And we're $80,000 down the drain.
It is contemplated that this can be used.
Let's do it.
Yes, and vote down.
Flood control, Bird Rock, Ocean Beach, Mission Valley.
Well, I think this is a gamble we have to take, and I think this is our responsibility to go ahead with it. I mean, everything can't work exactly by the book, and let them go.
That figure is 33,000, Jack. Remember we gave you an incorrect figure last time.
We did 80,000.
That's right. But
33 from us and something from the district.
33 from the district.
And the rest from us.
The rest from the state and federal.
Interesting. Your option to purchase the charge of
In the past, we've had great I said nothing to it at all, but I noticed in looking back at some of those pictures of the
it's gone 30 now, so you haven't transferred it. Well, perfect. Yeah, I haven't transferred it. control you have of this happening is the next one. File 106. How do we know?
While 106 is on the docket, even though it's going back, rather than have it come back at a future time in the same way, really doesn't state anything other than what we have right now. Because our council conference on the docket starts at 9 o'clock and is held in here anyway. It's a restatement of what we're doing right now.
Nobody prepared this. That's what we can't understand. I got on there.
Well,
This was some of the discussion that started out at the first meeting, and it was broken up in subcommittees, and nothing has been decided yet by the subcommittees. So you couldn't draft a resolution because there's nothing to draft yet.
well, I read the report from the minutes from your first meeting of the subcommittee, and
result of that.
had some excellent suggestions in it. The only thing, like, I was surprised, I thought maybe someone from the committee put the thing on, but it really is it doesn't change anything. It says that the 9 o'clock meetings will be held at 9 o'clock in the council.
What's wrong with 9 o'clock meetings at 9 o'clock? That's something new around here, you know.
Well, but
Anyway,
Is
it going to be
It's the file.
You know, I think this is actually the first breach in security that we've had of the programmed policy making by other bodies other than ourselves to load our book that we don't know anything about it now. If this had gone through and we hadn't caught it, imagine what would have rolled through next.
Yeah, but we caught it. We're on the ball. We're on the ball.
What's that? 104, I have a question. You were charging them for storing the water out there?
Yes, sir.
Who's paying for the evaporation? Them or us?
So evaporation is prorated. Actually, it will reduce our evaporation losses rather substantially.
And their water's the stuff on top that evaporates?
Yes.
I was covered pretty completely in the report that came with the docket.
No, it's prorated.
Rich?
I didn't get the
I want to
report.
ask the city manager on 104 if there would be any possibility of working out an agreement to store some of this water in Marina. Now, Mr. Manager, I know a few things about that there's practically no water in Marina, and that there's very little runoff, and you have to pump it uphill, and all that. But at the same time, there's been a lot of interest at Lake Marina for a long time about developing a recreation area, and I thought since
There's a way they can do it.
There's
a way they can do it. All they gotta do is make their own district and buy their own water and put it in the lake.
But I thought, in reading
it
this
is not
report,
feasible, according to Mr. Graham, to store other than these two facilities in the basis of what agreement MWD wants with us. Now, they're asking for this agreement because they've got an immediate and severe problem of storing some water. We might not have this existent in future years, although we've set the agreement up on a 5-year base, can't flow in 60 days notice before the end of any year.
But the owners or anybody else interested in storing water up there can buy it from MWD and we're storing it in the reservoir. Right?
Yeah.
are there any plans to make that marina into more of a campground, trailer park, recreation?
No, it'd be severe cost-wise to do so at the present time.
It's impractical.
That's right.
You've given that a lot of thought.
Yes,
Talking
it
around
has been
about $40, $50 an acre foot just to put the water in there.
Okay.
This is the problem. Water there is expensive unless it's runoff water.
Elsinore sets a pattern by getting state systems and buying the water to fill up the lake there on a district basis. And they could do the same up in Marina. They were told this several years ago. Real estate developer up there wanted to do this. Give him a lake.
They did. They wanted to do that at San Vicente too.
Yeah, but San Vicente's a reservoir.
Mr. Hahn, these are some two of our bigger reservoirs, aren't they? And also, what capacity is it at now?
Oh, we're
real low.
very
I
low.
understand about
That's correct. I think we got 15% in one and 11 or 12 in the other. Very nominal amount, both of us.
This will bring it up to what?
We'll still leave a considerable area for flood control purposes in both reservoirs. This was one of our conditions of consideration on this. We would retain a substantial amount of volume there to handle any flooding that might take place.
Is this the first year we're doing it, or we?
Yeah, MWD's never been in this position before, and what they're up against is they either have to shut down their entire conduit and pumping system, or else they have to store water. And there's very few places that they can store at any quantity.
we got a real problem on looking at those figures that all of our storage is up in the upper end of San Vicente. And doesn't concern Mike?
No, Mike feels we're reserving sufficient capacity for this problem.
Any other questions? Cuyamaca is buying water this year, aren't they, to keep the lake back up? Aren't they?
I don't know.
Unit irrigation?
Cuyamaca Lake, of course, full this year.
Well, but they're gonna keep it full now.
I understand they propose to keep up to some level. What happened?
Page 5. Page 6.
Mr. Mayor, on
Yes.
page 5, item 102 here, what is this, we have this aquatic building that's used for storing rowing equipment by San Diego State College.
Originally, it was the understanding of the associated students that they could not enter into a lease, so the lease was entered into with Aztec, what they call Aztec shops. Now, what we're actually doing is assigning the lease to the associated students. They've gotten a ruling since that they can enter into an agreement with the city.
And then your body corporate, or?
Yeah.
Page 6.
Just a question on our policy on our leases. When we assign one lease to another lease, is the original lessee, in the event of failure of the assignee, is the original lessee responsible?
Ed, can you answer that?
On an assignment?
Yes, on assignment. Is the original lessee still responsible?
Yeah.
If the failure of the assignee?
Don't we have to, don't we reserve the right to approval on it?
You have to approve any assignment of any lease to anyone.
But they're still liable in the event of failure?
Tom became a lease expert when he opposed the Catholic Church coming in across the street over there, and I had to do everything I could to work on him.
Converting.
Yeah, bought him 2 new Mason jars.
No, I think if it were for the Lutheran, it might have been the same.
Yeah, Walt is so strong on this subject, he don't even have a mason jar in his house.
There's a belief of separation of the two areas.
Page 6.
Well, like you said this morning, Alan, there are 2 votes there on a resolution of feasibility.
Mr. Mayor, in connection with the La Jolla Shores Drive improvement, the money will be received from the university this week.
Well, if we can delay the job, that helps our cash flow program pretty good.
Are there any provisions?
You know what I mean?
Are there any provisions for landscaping in the improvement area and under our new policy?
Well, this isn't a street which fits our new policy. We don't have if you recall that thing winding up the slope there, does not have a center island. It will have a steep bank on one side. The university does propose to do a rather considerable amount of landscaping. How soon they'll do it, I don't know.
On our policy, it not only includes tennis strips, but it also included the use of trees and any widening of existing streets or improving of existing streets with the use of gas tax funds, which we can use for the first time. That was my understanding, that's why
Well, you have another public agency owning the adjoining property in this instance, unless this council wishes to plant the trees for the university.
we don't have enough right-of-way. So we just passed a policy, that's why I asked.
We have right-of-way. The right-of-way that will be on the upper side, where there'll be any area really for planting adjacent to the parking facilities that the university proposed to build, will all be owned by the university. This is part of the agreement, in order that they will get some additional area for parking. Now, if you want us, I'll be happy to meet with them. This was entered into before the policy was set. They did indicate they were going to landscape. Now, we can go back to them and see how much they're going to do.
Well, the main reason why I asked for is that we've passed the policy, and I just want to see where we start implementing it.
Okay. 8:30. So we get on to the
Mayor?
this I'd like to ask the city manager, on number 114 there, do they report all sales to us over $5,000 or over 1,000 or all sales?
1,000, and it's a municipal code requirement.
All sales over 1,000?
Yes.
This replacement of another piece of equipment.
No, this is just notice of the disposal of a used unit.
That brings a pretty good price.
No, I mean, we're gonna replace it with another piece of equipment.
It's only 2 years old.
Oh, yeah, it has been replaced. This, I think, was one which we found unsatisfactory from the standpoint of the efficiency of operation.
That was the site opening experimental?
It was an experimental unit, yes. I'm not sure whether it was a site opening one.
We
One of our
authorized it.
experimental units.
Yeah, but the
Couple of things back there, we authorized the sale of 10 vehicles. You didn't know the mayor's car was and one of our trash cars.
That's the side opening, Wallace. My understanding was the side opening test was successful, or was appeared to be successful.
Said he wasn't sure.
I don't know which one this was. I do know it was one of the experimental units that was not satisfactory, and that's why we disposed of it. I'll get the detail of the unit.
Get the information before the
manager's here. We authorized the sale of it, remember?
Okay, let's get on to the scheduled conference. Sign ordinance this morning before us, sign control ordinance.
Alan, I want you to remember the mandate that you
Motion
got out of
to approve the
the
minutes?
right.
Yeah, I remember.
Is that the way you received that, La Jolla?
Is that the way you vote here?
Always.
Do we wait?
Always. Sure as hell let them know it's up.
Recess for 5 minutes? Well, everybody wants to get into the act here. Get it over with.
I'm not saying a word.
Ready?
Get here on one lousy time you're on time, and now you're a tyrant.
Well, you know, there's an old Chinese proverb that a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with the first step. So the mayor's beginning the first step. He's going to be on time now.
I didn't know that you belonged to AA, Frank.
Pardon?
First step.
They just wonder why nobody comes on time.
Now we got it all out of our system and ready to go to the conference?
Yeah.
Okay. Sperman, you want to start off? Ms. Cox?
This didn't start with Mr. Fairman.
Well, he has a memo in front of us. And that's
Yeah,
the
but,
reason.
may I start off, Your Honor?
Okay.
As the council will recall, the proposal came first, I think, from Real Estate Association in La Jolla and was picked up by Town Council and a few others. Their desire there was to have some sort of permissive legislation on the books for the establishment of a district so that there could be some control of real estate signs in La Jolla area. It's pretty much general agreement. In fact, the opposition to this has been almost nil in the La Jolla area. The council, when this came to conference, instructed the realtors and La Jolla Town Council, and if I do someplace, I'm sure somebody will tell me, to get a feeling from the San Diego Real Estate Association, which they have done, and the association itself, San Diego County Realtors, have no objection to this piece of permissive legislation. The Town Council and the Realtors have, in as far as we can find, followed all the instructions of the council. They have been working very closely with Alex and providing, Alex, what was this based on? Some other ordinance?
Yeah,
Ordinance you prepared.
Whittier, to recall, originally adopted an ordinance very similar to this. Ours is based on this ordinance. It's a little different. There's some differences.
But,
Not quite as restrictive.
And Alex has had conversations with all of those who've been involved in, on this ordinance to see if it meets pretty much what they were looking for, and yet be in such a position that it is what is designed for permissive legislation for any other entity or any other section of the city that would want to use it. It's not that restrictive. And basically then we think that this has been done as the council instructed to provide a piece of permissive legislation for the establishment of a district that could fit most any place.
Doesn't this permissive legislation then get us into a box of the city? We have permissive legislation now on the SC zone, and La Jolla has put it into effect, and admittedly there are over 200 violations, and they want us to enforce it to everybody else, but, don't bother me, but put all those other guys in line.
and we become the bad guys who are enforcing legislation which they want imposed upon themselves. And they say, well, keep it on the books, but don't enforce it. And we're in a very strange position with this kind of thing. And I think until they clear up the sign ordinance in La Jolla, which is still in limbo, to heap another can of worms on top of that when we haven't got the first one solved.
Well, isn't this now under study? The SC zone?
I think there were presentations before the Plan Commission concerning amendment of the SC zone. And then there was a call for continuance, I believe, something in the order of 6 months. The La Jolla Town Council would like to review the proposed amendments further.
In the meantime, we're the bad guys in this whole darn thing, and we didn't bring it up in the first place, and they wanted to impose it on themselves. I just don't like to be put in that position. What's the master plan show for that?
Mr. Ross? To follow a little bit up on what Ira said, is that the problem is not just limited to La Jolla. 3 years ago or so, in Claremont, they had a sign cleanup campaign, and I forget, they had about 200 instances of sign violations, and they went down and worked with McConnell and somebody else in the city, and for a whole year they worked on the thing and got a good part of it cleaned up. But before we start placing any ordinances on the books, any more ordinances that are going to require the city's enforcement, I think we should be reviewing the staffing that we have that can enforce the present ordinances we have. We don't have adequate staffing. We have 2 people who have additional duties whose whole responsibility is the entire 365 miles of the city for sign enforcement. Is this correct, Jim? And really, it's an impossibility with the procedure of notification, 10-day waiting period, re-notification, checking the site, and so on. It's almost an impossible procedure just to enforce the present ordinance that we have of the 8-foot and the commercial signs and residential sections and subdivisions and so on like that. And I'm in favor of passing restrictions if they're for the good of the community, but I'm not in favor of establishing a law that, by the very nature of our structure, that we can't enforce and so that people violate it.
Well, if you do have an ordinance prohibiting certain types of signs, this might be some authority for the property owner to complain if it's an illegal posting, and the police department should pick the thing up and haul it away. They've done that.
What, a $50,000 sign?
No, I'm talking about the old
How about something on the side of Lyons Clothing Department, that's painted on the wall? Pick it up and take it in. Those are signs.
He's talking about real estate.
Well, this
Temporary real estate.
This is real estate over here.
No, you're talking about the SC.
Well, this covers.
This covers everything?
What does it
No,
cover?
This is
Only for the real estate.
For sale or lease sign.
For sale or lease rent.
Residential zone.
I think a broad interpretation ordinance would cover the American flag, too, if it's larger than 3 square feet.
Why, is that a for sale sign on a house?
It says including but not limited to. That refers to the word flag, that's not like you get.
Used for
Red
display.
Chinese.
That's true. Or any flag, bunting, or material used for display or advertising purposes. Interesting point.
Yeah.
I would not be in favor of it under that limitation.
Mr. Fairman, how does the Realty Board feel about it? They made any recommendations to you?
I'm not aware of their
Good.
The representatives from town council are sitting back here, and they were the ones who made the contact. Recall it was Mr. Turner.
Isn't this kind of a unique way of approaching such a thing? Isn't this a proposed ordinance that would be applicable under the zoning administration, and consequently should have been heard by the planning commission rather than by the council?
well,
I mean, if you're going to ask questions now, who's in favor of it and who's against it, how are you going to determine it without a hearing?
the council court could determine that the commission should have a hearing on it.
One step ahead of us.
Well, any ordinance, any planning or zoning ordinance always does go there, and I thought was required to have a public hearing application ordinance, even though we're in favor, unless we go the emergency procedure and adopt it ourselves on an emergency basis, where we're not required to have the hearing. Is this right, Mr. Hartman?
Well, it's a referendum period.
We usually send the ordinances, of course, to the planning commission. However, there is nothing in the books that requires an ordinance like this to go through the planning commission, but the city for years has had a policy to send all these ordinances to the planning commission for public hearing and their recommendation. Now, on a change of zone, you're absolutely right. There, according to the code, any ordinance passed along these lines has to go to the planning.
What policy number was that you referred to, that it's the city policy?
No policy number.
In Custis.
Custis.
More.
Mrs. Cox?
I think, as a matter of fact, you're right that this should be the correct procedure.
If we decide.
Well, whatever the council decides to do with it this time, but this I thought was a rather unusual thing. And as a matter of fact, sent the ordinance and memo around when it was still in real rough draft. In fact, I lost it for 2 days in its round, but didn't get it back to the attorney. But the council at that time indicated that perhaps they wanted more information on it before anything was done with it.
Would this eliminate Helen Bird Bath and those little postman mailbox type?
No, this realty sign is for sale, for rent, for lease kind of thing.
Well, let me read it to you.
Well, read it to the attorney. This isn't the
All right, for the purpose of the section, the word sign is defined to mean any structure and all parts composing the same together with the frame, background, or support, therefore, which is used for advertising or display purposes, or any statuary, sculpture, molding, or casting used for advertising or display purposes, or any flags, bunting, or material used for display or advertising purposes. What I probably have to ask the definition of the word display.
Keep reading.
Not included or limited to placards, cards, statues, areas carrying the following or similar words: for rent, for sale, or for lease. All right. What I'm saying is, as far as you read, it says, but not limited to, that if it doesn't have for sale, for lease, or for rent on it, it doesn't have to be limited to that. But then if it were for display, if a guy had a bird bath or a sculptured carved lion or a rock or something.
Your semicolon is down immediately in front of the first for rent.
Yes, in other words, if the ordinance comes into play, of course, if you have a for rent, for sale, or for lease sign, and then with it, of course, you have a flag or bunting or any of these materials used to display this for rent, for sale, or for lease sign. And the intent, of course, is to keep commercial advertising out of residential districts. So, and there's a case, Burke versus the Municipal Court, that held that this was legal to do it this way. As a matter of fact, this ordinance came out of that case. And in that case, they stated that the intent of the ordinance is to prevent advertising of commercial enterprises in a residence area. And they went on further to say that real estate signs not only advertise a house for sale or for lease, but also advertise the real estate broker's business. And that's a distinction that they draw. So this ordinance, of course, would allow a for rent, for sale, or for lease sign as long as it didn't have also ex-realty.
Should that word, but not limited to, be changed to limited to then?
No, it's not limited to placards, cards, structures, or areas.
You have to read the whole thing.
Okay. Would we ask Helen? Would we ask the people from the council, or a little bit of background? I don't have an appreciation for it.
I wanted to add, does this mean that, from your interpretation, that the owners can put their own sign up?
Yes, sir.
But not a commercial firm?
That's right. The owner
That's
would
permitted under this.
Yes, that's
right.
That's right. The owner could put for sale or for rent or for lease and his phone number under there, and if they called his house, there'd be nothing from stopping him from
anyone other than a licensed broker.
Okay, let me ask you another question.
Jack was asking about background, and Dan Turner, I think, could provide that as well as anyone else.
Can I ask the one question on the signs off the board, sir?
I have one question over here on page 2 of the ordinance. Just lets the owner put his name and address on a sign, but there cannot be any other individual other than the owner of said lot or parcel of real property when we're talking about sale or lease. Now, somebody say down in the far end of my district, like Paradise Hills, happens to own an apartment building out in La Jolla, I can see somebody interested in purchasing the building might want to call him up or write him. But if this guy's got a couple of vacancies, to put his name and his address and his phone number, which is a long distance phone call, I think the owner in another part of the city, the owner should be able to put the resident apartment manager's address or apartment number, telephone number, so they can inquire to a certain piece of property to know which apartment to go to in order to rent it. This would be in violation of the ordinance as it's presently written.
Of course, we could cater the ordinance to the council's desires or the way, or anything you want on it.
Minor changes could be corrected if we hurry.
Well, the question, my question sits somewhat in this. The owner can put a for sale sign up or a for rent sign. The owner might be a bank. The owner might be a financial institution that is foreclosed. It could be almost anything, the owner, right?
Yeah.
Or I, as an individual property owner, I own the property, I live there. I don't have a phone, and I want to put another phone number on. Or can you assign your phone number to somebody else? I mean, what's this thing of a phone number or your phone number? What constitutes your phone number?
This would have to be interpreted, of course, on the facts of each particular case. I guess this falls on a point within point 2 of Mr. Fairman's letter.
Difficulty with policing. I think rather than tear it apart for its inconsistencies or ambiguities at the present time, let's talk about the general concept. I mean, we may abandon the whole thing, or if we don't adopt it, then let's get into brushing up the language. Mr. Turner? Mike? Or,
Mr. Mayor?
Floyd?
Speaking about the background Mr. Walsh was asking about, it's been 21 years and over in La Jolla. There's been a gentleman's agreement with the real estate brokers in that area that they will not put any signs on the lawn, or to that extent that you would realize. And that has been carried out up until the last year, and it has worked very satisfactorily. It was a wonderful working agreement with the REBA, the association out there. And all of a sudden, 2 members voted the association and put their little daisies on the sign, on the lawn, so to speak. And that is the reason that we are asking for this type of ordinance. We could envision that we could look like a blighted area out there because 4 or 5 realtors want to put signs on lawns. Why, you know what that would look like. We haven't had any opposition in La Jolla at all. The REBA is completely with us, and they ask us to work with them, and that's the reason that we're here. You'll recall on July the 8th, I think, was the first time that we came before you folks. And at that time, the question was proposed that we didn't have the answer, and then we went back, and the question was, and I think Mr. Hitch was the one that asked it, how does the San Diego Realty Board feel towards that? I have Mr. Leltz here with us, who is the president of the Association of La Jolla, and also is the chairman of the sign committee in the town council, so he wears 2 hats. He immediately appeared before the Real Estate Board of San Diego and received their blessing, and also in the form of a letter which we transmitted to Mrs. Cobb immediately. So we cleared up that particular facet of the inquiry that you folks had at that time. We're not asking the council at all for you to impose any sign restrictions that the people don't want. What we're anxious about, in the number of meetings that we've had with Mr. Harper, is to construct what you have here in your hands here, this rough draft, giving us the hope that you folks would permit us, well, for a better term, maybe it's the enabling legislation for a period of time, giving us the opportunity to obtain the information of the overwhelming support, and we know that we can get the overwhelming support in the form of petitions to set up this type of a district. Sign district. Now, all we're asking is that, as you notice on the first sentence here, the sign control district is intended to prevent advertising of commercial enterprises in the real estate in the residential area, and that is what we're talking about, residential area only. And what Mr. Schaefer was speaking about, on a commercial basis, we're not discussing that at all. We have even decided that it would be okay. I mean, we've talked it over amongst our 2 groups, putting the sign in the window on a commercial basis. But this is a thing that we don't like to have display and advertising in residential areas. If I may made myself clear then.
Okay. A couple of quick questions. Mr. Turner, did your group give any consideration in the establishment of a district to tie in with it the cost of enforcement, such as we have in other districts where we assess the people for different aspects of it? I'm wondering here, since this will be a specialized district which will require increased enforcement and increased costs to the city, had any consideration been given that the district then would pick up the tab?
We didn't discuss it as such, but I can assure you this, that and I've been with the Real Estate Association out there, commonly known as REBA, and they themselves will help the enforcement of it. They're really incensed over what is happening on two of the realtors out there. And they will take it upon themselves, I'm sure. Am I not right, Mr. Wells, of help policing it?
Yes,
they'd be happy to if they had the authority.
Would they, I'm just asking these hypothetical questions, not knowing whether or not we would go to it, but presumably this might entail the cost of one full-time man, say, $8,000 to $10,000 a year.
We could provide a man to do it.
Well, no, we couldn't do that. We couldn't have an ordinance on our books where we had citizens enforcing it, so we would be required by the city. Well, that's the first question. The second question is, would it be possible in your organization or in your structure to have a provision where rather than having a commercial sign, and if you had a red, white and blue, I guess, in La Jolla, stick that could go into the ground or something that would notify people driving by a house that this was for sale and call in one central number, and this central number wouldn't refer them to any one realtor but would refer them to the realtor that has the listing. Is there any consideration on
I'd like
that?
to answer that question from the standpoint that actually all brokers thought that they had to use signs as a tool of their trade. And this is what you're bringing out right now, that this is a method of selling houses. And the brokers reluctantly went to the use of no signs. It was only after that they had worked under the use of no signs and they found that it said work satisfactory and that it added so much of the beauty of La Jolla that they condescended to keep using no signs. So it really isn't necessary to have any display of any kind in front of the house itself.
Even notice, like the last two homes I bought, both of them were driving down a street in a neighborhood looking, and I could have driven all day if I didn't see a sign of some indication.
If you did that in La Jolla today, you would have only seen a couple homes. You wouldn't have seen, you probably would have missed the home that you really wanted to buy. So you should, we found that they do come to the brokers, of course, and even though the brokers did object to the use of no signs, and they wanted to use signs, they found out later that it works. As long as there's no signs at all, it works. Everybody's happy. There are no signs to destroy the beauty of La Jolla, and the brokers still sell the properties, and the owners have.
Question for Mr. Turner, and I have another one on the procedures for setting it up. What do these two brokers that it's not going along with this think about it in general? I mean, why do they want to have signs out?
Mr. Wells, I think you can answer that. Like saying that one market's staying open on Sunday. It's the same principle. If you've got a sign up and nobody else has, why, naturally you've got an advantage.
It's like an attorney chasing ambulance.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. The other is, how do you set up the district? On what basis? Do we have a procedure that we ordinarily just follow when you want to set up a district?
Yes, we, of course, passing enabling legislation, and then the property owners would petition from this district, and it would depend on the number of signatures and the hearings on whether or not the commission and the council felt it was wise to include this certain area of the district, sort of same type of procedure somebody would go through if they wanted to change a zone in a particular area by way of petition.
Well, is there more than one association of realtors, or do they all are required to belong to the association by law, or what? No, they aren't required to.
Can't join.
All voluntary.
Anybody that's licensed in the state of California can sell property.
You belong to the association just by paying a dues? Is that the only requirement?
That's correct. I might say we're prepared. We have permission from you folks to get these petitions. We know that we can get the signatures on the petition.
Well, I think you can get the petitions without the council doing anything at all, can't you?
Let's come.
You have to have the legislation on the books in order to start the ball rolling, the enabling legislation. But Jack was talking about policing and enforcing. The policing would be no problem as far as this particular area is concerned, because this is one thing that the REBA said all the way along. There's no problem as far as policing is concerned. Now, what the cost of enforcement would be, I don't have any idea at this time, but I really can't imagine that it's going to be that great.
There's two
Because it
methods.
would
Two methods of enforcement. One would be the actual policing, and the other one would be on a complaint basis. We have ordinances on the book that require one or the other.
Well, this would be done largely probably on complaint basis, because we're very aware.
Mike?
Well, I have a couple questions to Mr. Lowe. Sir, can any real estate broker only have belonged to agreed by the Real Estate Brokers Association, and about what percentage of the practicing real estate brokers do belong?
Percentage-wise, the majority outside of, there are 55 some offices belong, and there are, I think, maybe 3, 4, 5 at the most that do not belong. Of those that do not belong, there's only two that operate in housing, residential stuff. So the others, you might say for effect, have no purpose in belonging, as we do also have a multiple. Now anybody can belong, but if they violate, of course, our rules and regulations, then they cannot belong.
They can be out.
Right.
And one other question, Mr. Mayor. Some people hesitate to, I do see a number of houses advertised in La Jolla newspapers by the real estate brokers, and sometimes they'll give the address, so a person can't get a bunch of addresses and drive out on his own Sunday and do a bunch of shopping without having to bother a real estate broker until he's decided upon the house. So there is an alternative under what you propose to having to come to the broker to find out what houses are available.
That's very correct. We could advertise by addresses and have an effect an open house without a sign.
Yes, I don't see any penalties prescribed in this. That seems to me would be the policing activity. If you just go out and slap someone's wrist, or it's a case of somebody reporting someone else, if there's a penalty involved, and I don't see one here.
Yes.
Well,
if the ordinance is violated, of course, it would be a misdemeanor, and we have a section in the municipal code that states that any violation of any ordinance in the municipal code is a misdemeanor, and it would be
that's the penalty in a misdemeanor violation.
Right.
Can we prescribe penalties for first, second, third offenses, or anything of that nature in these things? You do in traffic, that's why I asked the question. I mean, there's some sort of set scale on this.
Yes, well, of course, the penalty set out in the municipal code is $500 and/or 6 months in jail.
Up to,
right. And on second, third offense, of course, let's say if this ordinance was enforced and somebody was prosecuted for it, and it would be the second offense, that could be the judge could be advised of that, and that could be taken into consideration in the sentence, or it could be prior could be alleged. A procedure could be set up, of course.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about is if you are going to have this type of ordinance, I think it would have a great deal more effect if everyone knew what the rules were on this thing. For example, first time offender $25, second time $50, something like that, because the cost of this thing, the cost of your office, when someone voluntarily reports something of this type, I can't envision are sending people out to catch these signs. I think it's going to have to be somewhat of self-policing within the industry. And if they are going to be effective, in short, if we are going to have something like this and they are to be effective, I think it would be a lot more effective with the penalty spelled out. And I just wondered if this was possible.
Speaking to my attorney on that, I can
have a general section, and as far as the penalties are concerned, that would be up to the judge. Sentences, of course. We have a maximum of $500 or 6 months in jail. And, within those bounds, the judge uses his own discretion.
But there's no bail set up, like, for example, on traffic citations possible.
There would be a suggested bail. I think that could be worked out. Yeah, that's no problem. I do think you have a good point, though, as far as the application of this ordinance. Insofar as in section C here, you have the phrase "no sign or sign shall be erected."
probably should read that no person shall erect a sign.
Making it a personal violation
Making it a
rather
personal
than a
violation.
sign violation.
I think that would be a good suggestion to clear up the effect of the application of a misdemeanor.
Ambiguity responsibility. Check.
My question is to Jim from the department standpoint. He appears to be opposed to it. He spelled out some of the reasons here. Two questions, Jim. Could you give me some of the background on why your department would be opposed to it, or elaborate on your statements here? And then secondly, that if we believed in the concept, what would you recommend as the procedure of approach to drafting a proper ordinance in this area would be? 2 points. Point 1, why you're opposed to it, but part 2, that even though you're opposed to it, if we said that concept we liked it, what procedure would you recommend that we follow?
Well, the memo directed primarily to Councilman Cobb, you're pointing out or trying to make the point that you don't necessarily object to the proposed legislation, but from a planning standpoint, we can't support the proposed amendment. That is, we fail to see where this has any great effect on the general health, safety, public welfare, where it achieves any planning or zoning purpose. If the council wishes to pass it, we have no objection to it. We can't see any positive reason for adopting this kind of legislation. And we point out that it's...
Aesthetics is not the reason.
Well, this really doesn't... We made one point in our memo to Councilman Cobb that it doesn't really deal with aesthetics. It doesn't deal with signs itself. It only deals with the authorship of signs. You see, whose name goes on it. And it still allows 8-square-foot signs in residential districts, which can be put up by the homeowner or whoever, and merely restricts who can put his name on the sign. So we feel that this doesn't do anything even in terms of aesthetics, perhaps. Maybe we don't know enough about it, but just on the basis of what we've seen in the ordinance and the proposals that are made, we think it deals with not with aesthetics, not with the control of signs, but merely the authorship of signs, and therefore we just can't see a positive reason for supporting the legislation. We also feel there could be an enforcement problem. I don't know what the extent of this might be. We do know that in the sign control business, in terms of all our zoning regulations, that many violations can be carried out with impunity. That you can violate the sign regulations for a period of time. By the time we get someone to court, the purpose has been served for the sign, and the sign comes down before any judgment is even rendered. And there isn't much enforcement involved in many ways here. We could see the possibilities of a great deal of nitpicking in connection with the proposed legislation on the part of homeowners and so forth harassing each other. But basically, we just can't feel, or we just don't feel that there is positive reason in terms of sign control for recommending approval of this. And we do suggest that if sign control or the appearance of signs is a real problem, perhaps we ought to restrict the size or the amount of advertising space allocated to various properties throughout the city as a whole. We permit 8 square feet now, which is a fairly large sign area as far as I know it in comparison to most cities in California, particularly in an R1 district.
Following up on my questions, Jim really hit a point that at least I completely overlooked, is that really this is not a sign control ordinance. It is an authorship, and from the mere fact of authorship, I think realty signs are to me a lot better appearing than most for sale by owner and for rent by owner signs that you see quite often as makeshift and hand paint jobs that go up. I'm wondering that if the different approach wouldn't be number one, to review our total sign ordinance from a city standpoint in regards to the size of the sign, and number two is to exercise the control. It's one thing to put up a sign on a lawn, and then the other thing that's like realtors are the greatest violators of doing it is they'll have 2 or 3 flags on the house, normally in the parkway between the sidewalk and the street, which is city property. They'll also have signs down at the corner directing them up from both corners to a house and so on, which is normally off the person's property, either on other private property or on public property. Again, to me, the solution would seem is to enforce the non-use of public right-of-way for signs and flags, and the overall review of our total sign picture for the city, and reduce the size from the 2 foot by 4 foot to a size which is comparable, say, to a real estate sign. Because what other signs are there necessary in a residential area other than the real estate and then house identification?
Well, these are I think Jim's got some good points, and these were discussed or touched upon at some point when REBA and the town council first came to the council, and a couple of the statements that were made at that time was that the council would certainly not like to see any even permissive legislation that would permit owner from selling his own piece of property and putting a sign out that said for sale. The council completely blocked that one at the time. Is one of the reasons that it was done this way, and I know we sat around with Alex for some time and wondered how you did it. I don't know, maybe Chuck remembers this conversation much better than I did, but I remember that basically what we're talking about came into being because of what we felt the council said at that particular time. Wasn't that right, Chuck?
The original request was for no signs at all.
Yeah.
It's true that we can't completely eliminate signs in an area like this. I think it can be drawn a parallel with our SC sign control ordinance that was adopted 9 years ago. The impression has been given that we're having trouble with this and that it's not working out. It's the farthest thing from the truth, because we're very, very happy with it. I have letters here from all over the country and even from out of the country requesting information how other communities can do it. It's true that there are what's so-called violations, the 200 figure that is mentioned, but these are not violations. One of the shortcomings of the legislation when it was first adopted was the fact that there was no grandfather clause in it. The signs that were existing could remain up. At the request of the Planning Commission and with various meetings with them and with our own committees, we have since rectified that and added the 3 areas that were omitted when it was first adopted. 1, the parking lot signs, 2, the signs on the rears of buildings, and 3, the cutoff date at which time everybody had to go by the same rules. Now, these are presently worked out, and we're trying to schedule a meeting with the Planning Commission in regard to these. It is based entirely on aesthetics, and I think the same parallel can apply to the real estate signs. We feel that it's increased the value of the property in the downtown area considerably. We think that it's added immeasurably to the beauty of the commercial district. And all we're asking is that you say, okay, if you feel the people want it, why go out and get the petitions, go get the signatures and bring them back to us, and if the people want it, why can't they have it?
If I wanted to violate the idea, if I were one of the realtors who does not go along with you, it don't seem like it would be a great deal of trouble to copyright a configuration, a shape similar to the Chevrolet Insignia or the Ford Insignia, the shape, a color, just a background image. And then in my newspaper advertising and so forth, I'd always put this identification there. Consequently, I could have in homes all over La Jolla this configuration, shape, and color for sale. Well, this would be an automatic indicator, and I don't see where this ordinance would stop it.
And it's not, but it still wouldn't be advertising on residential property.
Well, isn't
nature has come to my business.
Well, actually, it is. It is, because you can have any sort of thing that you would want. You see what I'm talking about? You can have a an orange oval or something like that. And basically, I don't know what your intent must be, is that if you've got a bunch of houses for sale out there, you don't want anybody to know it. Consequently, it looks like it's a very prosperous community when maybe relatively it wouldn't be. So that, I mean, really, this is what you're trying to do. So with this, are you accomplishing what you want to accomplish by having these emblems around saying this one's for sale and this one's for sale and this one's for sale? Is this going to accomplish what you want to do? In short, it sounds real good, but will it accomplish it? Because really, the only guy you have to control is the one that don't want to go along with it. And he probably, if he's successful in business, can figure these things out faster than you can figure ways to block them.
This is true, and we have the same problem in the SC commercial zone with signs. That they try to get around them, but nevertheless, we're taking the first steps. We're trying to get something going, which will more or less control the aesthetics of the entire area. And I think if you give us this, and if we are successful in going out and getting these signatures, and it's based entirely on the district, I doubt very much whether an R4 zone district would want it. So therefore, the people wouldn't want it, it wouldn't go in there. But I dare say that there will be many others following suit if you give us this permissive legislation.
I think there's 2 points that are important. We talk about level of service, and we talk about those who benefit pay, and none of these have been considered in this thing, nor in the SC ordinance. If we establish one level of service for one part of the city at the expense of the rest of the city, I don't think it's fair. Now, there might be a way of handling this, that when somebody comes in for a rezoning, they know that it costs them $50 or $75 or whatever it is to process a rezoning. If somebody wants to process a complaint, whether it be the town council or what, there would be a fee for processing a complaint, so the city would be paid for what it costs to follow up on that complaint. And that might be a way of handling the cost, because it concerns me how many people it's going to take to clear this up. And this is a figure which is hard to reach, whether it's one man or half a man or 2 men, and all the costs through our planning department and our city attorney's office. But if we established a fee, and if you wanted to complain, you paid a fee, and it would be processed in that manner. I'm still concerned about the SC ordinance. It's still in a state of nothingness. There's still these violations. There's still no agreement amongst these people that they will take them down. There's no schedule been set. The city is derelict and not enforcing the law which is on the books, and La Jolla says they want their SC ordinance, but don't enforce it now. We're not ready.
These aren't violations. These 200 violations are not violations, because there's nothing in the ordinance that says they have to take them down. They were up prior to 1956 when the ordinance was adopted.
And then we get complaints here from all the new people. The new businesses have gone into La Jolla since this sign control was in effect. They said, we can't do what all these other people can do, and these 200 people are in violation of the ordinance, and we try and come in and compete with them, and we're not allowed to do these same things. Now, we're in the middle, you see. Again, we're the bad guys.
No, this was a defect, and this is something that we're now remedying.
And the
We've worked it out with our town council.
The defect in our ordinance has not been corrected, has it?
No, but we've taken the second step to correct it. We've met with the planning commission. They've told us to go back and arrive at an agreement between ourselves.
We've been taking this abuse for 5 years in this thing, and nothing has come to correct it. We catch it all the time. Every time some new business goes up, they raise Cain with each member of the council. I know they get in touch with me, and they say, all the businesses around, they got all these big signs, and I can't put a sign on my building. How about that? It's not fair.
This new change in the ordinance, if we are successful in getting it adopted, will cure all that.
So, I mean, we accept this abuse every time we have this special legislation, and I'd like to see this one cleared up before we put ourselves in another can of worms.
The very reason they came out to that area was because of that sign control, and yet they want to violate it.
Oh, I don't think that's so.
Property values are 3 times bigger.
Well, that's not just the reason.
Very important.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask La Jolla representative, the real estate signs on residential homes that is a fine concern rather than commercial signs painted on walls.
We feel that the other one, although it has its shortcomings, is on the way to being solved, and we've taken
a number of steps to do this. This is no longer concerned us because we feel that we've got the answer to that, assuming the planning commission will go along with the recommendations that we've made.
Let's not get the two ordinances, the proposed ordinance and the other ordinance mixed at this point, Mike, but what the point that Ira is making is that he wants to see that one cleaned up before we get into another one.
I don't have the same objection some of the other members do to the enforcement problem. There are a number of these real estate signs that are stuck on city easements and whatnot, and if you take a visit to the police station in La Jolla, you'll see probably 15 or 20 of these piled up in back. These fellas just pick them up and throw them in the back of their patrol car and take them to the station whenever they see an illegal posting. The illegal signs on the lawns in residential areas was hooked into some kind of ordinance that would just increase the authority of our personnel to pick these up. I don't think it's going to involve any additional.
Then as an attorney, then you would recommend that our police department could, on one case where it's city property, it's one thing, but then to instruct our police department to start going on private property and picking up signs in violation of the code. I think there's a couple of procedures that might have to be followed beforehand. I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but I would hope so.
Okay, too.
We're looking into that on another proposal.
Let me try this on both sides. I think we pretty well realized what the council wanted to do, the town council, Reba, and so forth out there, wanted to do. As keeping in mind that the first thing they asked the council for was no real estate signs at all in residential property, and they didn't get very far with this one. And this is to bring it in line to what all of us at that time thought the council's instructions were. If there, I don't have a feeling as to whether there's a great deal of objection to a basic concept, except Ivory made it pretty clear. Basic concept. I do think that before, we can't pick the ordinance apart. It has not gone through the proper procedure to the planning department and all this. And if there's not a great deal of objection to the basic concept of what they're trying to do, would the council be in favor of sending this through the department for working out to the planning department and setting hearings on a piece of legislation?
I don't know. I don't know that I would necessarily want to say go ahead in that direction, Helen. I see another thing that we haven't talked about a little bit, which would cause me to more or less go along with what Jim has suggested. If we're going to do something like this, it ought to be citywide. The reason for that is I can just see automatically, and we've been through this routine before, where is the district boundaries? Who draws the line in the first place to try and get the percentage required? We've just had some real battles in that direction in this area. Sure. Where does the area stop or start? It might be easier to go citywide and cause a great deal less conflict, it would seem to me, if it's good, in La Jolla, and keeps the property values up, and keeps it kind of quiet when we have vacancies. Why it seems to me that it would be the same advantage citywide. And this makes a little bit of sense. Then the other things, enforcement, etc., they're on top of that. But I do think that unless you get an ordinance that's going to be effective, I think we're spinning our wheels because, well, it's just like the SC ordinance. It's ineffective, and 5 years later we're still fighting the battle. I think what has been said here at the table is we just don't want to start another big problem in the wrong direction. I think that we should make it so it'll work. If it's going, and if it's good in one area, it ought to be good in all areas. Okay.
My feeling is that you probably would have no problem getting the signatures. It's easy to assume that at least half the houses are not for sale in La Jolla. The problem would come up, I would sign a petition, and then possibly a year or two from now when I want to sell my house, and then I'm faced with it, that's when I might get upset. And Ivory's point, who do you get upset with? You get upset with the legislators. My feeling is that I would be in favor of referring to the planning department and to the planning commission the subject of review of the 8 square foot signs allowed in a residential area with the view towards a reduction in the size in the area, which could be applied citywide. Because I think a 2 foot by 4 foot sign on a residential area what justification do you have in an R1, 2, or 3 except for rent, for lease, or for sale? And I think that the 3-foot sign here would appear to be a real good step aesthetically for the entire city. I think that what they're aiming at is aesthetics here, and I don't think authorship is any control on aesthetics or any improvement. I think the size of the sign is an excellent one, and so I would recommend that rather than referring this and having them hold hearings on a sign control ordinance which is directed at authorship, I would rather see us move, and if when the discussion's over, I would move that we refer the sign ordinance requirements in all of the zones to the planning department with the idea of reduction in size of signs allowed in a residential area.
I just wanted to ask a couple questions, Jim, in relation to this problem of authorship is well pointed out in your memo. But there might be a way of defining authorship and still covering the subject as a compromise between the two extremes, one no signs and one giving the homeowner opportunity. Supposing the ordinance included the display of signs by an owner inside the premises only, in other words, in the window of this circuit. For that matter, any sign, sale, rent, or lease inside, exposed from the inside of the premise. Would help to do the thing I think all of us are talking about, and getting away from the gaudy signs on the front lawn and the blending and the other sorts of things.
Or you wouldn't be allowed. You have to keep the sign displayed inside the interior of a residence or a garage or something like that.
I mean, it's kind of a compromise between having no signs and having them all over the place. I don't know that that's the answer. Mr. Hahn said that this kind of ordinance is enforced in Englewood. Did they do that on a whole citywide basis, Walter, or can you give any information on it?
Yeah, they started with it on a district basis, and was pretty much enforced without any great degree of trouble because of the cooperation of the realty board itself in the area. They did, as you've indicated, they had a provision for household or for sale, for rent, for lease sign within the premises.
They did have an inset.
I'd like to ask, do the real estate agents, they put signs out without their authorship on the property now?
No, they don't. And I'd like to state your problem of enforcement. The brokers have enforced no signs since 1943 up to this point without any help from the city. Now, we do need a little help because we've got two people that we cannot influence. And I want to say enforcement, I don't think is a problem that you're trying to make. I think it's a cause of that. And as far as we do not use any signs of any kind, the brokers. Your question.
Another compromise that may not be as good as yours, I like that, but is that signs simply give a phone number rather than designated whose phone number. You can put a phone number on a sign. One of the problems, and it looks real garish, particularly since there are not many of them, is these huge things with fancy names and all this kind of jazz. Advertising signs, basically. In fact, you have to look a long time to find out the house is for sale.
The big fear I have is I would rather see us go towards either a size of a sign, which is common throughout the city, or no signs throughout the city, or signs in windows throughout the city. But, boy, I just don't want to start getting into configurations, colors of signs, what you can say on signs, and how you say it. Next time we'll say it has to be in a certain district, that we have to have Old English lettering, and we can't have Gothic, or I mean this is absurd. But getting into the colors of the signs getting into the configurations of the signs other than their actual signs, I think we're making that mistake. And I would rather see us hold our discussion to no signs at all, signs in windows, or reduction in size of signs, or leave it the way it is. But not get into the what goes on the sign, as long as it's not a public nuisance and not obscene.
We got it. That is, as far as the district is concerned, is what Reba asked for in the first place, was no signs in the residential district. But the council would buy that, everybody's happy.
Do you see any problems with the district?
This obscene thing kind of bothers me a little, because I read in the thing, it says statutory and flags might be statutory grape.
Oh. Tom, is that your attitude?
He was scratching his nose and trying to get attention at the same time.
Oh, is that what he was doing?
No, I'm just,
On this side I couldn't see his thumb.
thinking here that, to me anyway, history tells us something in regards to this particular area. For a number of years, this area has been patrolling themselves, and they have had a great deal of, apparently, luck until recently. I think the fact that the group come before us representing various areas of the community, I think perhaps it would be feasible and compatible to extend the city influence in trying to control the area and hold continue the upgrading of the area. The fact that they are interested in doing it, it indicates some concern, and there might be a reason for some concern. I see no reason why we can't proceed with the concept of this sign control of the real estate in the residential area on the basis that let them proceed in the right channels and a district be formed, and then a public hearing come up at a later date, and then we can decide as to the confirmation of the district and to decide whether to proceed with it altogether. But the concept itself, I feel, is within reason. And Jack brought out a good point about the size of the sign, 8 square feet. I think most of the real estate signs are 18 by 24, aren't they? That's the basic size, and maybe we should look at that area, keep it down to 18-inch by 24-inch. So the general concept I'm in favor of.
18 to 20.
If we're counting noses and so on, I would really hate to see us get started off in a direction which possibly some of us might have some reservations on. I think it's an excellent idea if it's approached on the basis of aesthetics. But again, I can't see any aesthetics involved in regards to what's said on the sign or who is saying it. I mean, you could have just as much printing, just as many different colors and so on by the owner of the property as you would have by a realtor. There's no restrictions on this. So to me, aesthetics is really not aided here, and I just don't know what is the advantage then of the fact that the realtors are not displayed on it. I would rather see us take the sign, and I think it's good for the city of San Diego. I mean, I think that I'd rather see more and more parts of our city be forced, shall we say, into a position to start looking more like La Jolla. I think there's a lot of fine things out there, and that other communities could look a little bit more like it, and the city itself would be far better off. But I would rather see us approach no signs in the residential area, with the exception of window or door signs, which to me then would accomplish what we're doing, and then limit those size signs to a reduced area, say of the 3 foot, which seems to be not too obnoxious. I'd rather see us do that than get into allowing signs, but only certain types of signs by certain people. And I think we're only getting back to this can of worms that I heard pointed out. And so I, for one, if we're going to make any reference, would rather see it referred to the planning department and commission the idea of no signs or a compromise in where the signs can be located or a reduction in size of signs, but I wouldn't want to see us get into an ordinance and have it go through a bunch of hearings and bring it back on what size signs, what can be written on signs.
Your Honor, answer Mr. Walsh.
I second Jack's motion.
The homeowner hasn't given us any problem, Mr. Walsh, from the standpoint that we sent a little committee to him, and we discussed it with him, and he's always been willing to not use a sign. That's why we haven't had any problems with the homeowner. And this is one of your fears, that the homeowner will put up a sign with a lot of words on it, and then you're not respecting him. We aren't really concerned about him, because he will go along with it all explained to us.
Well, why don't the two realtors go along with it when it's explained to them?
Because they're a commercial enterprise, they're out strictly for the dollar, and not interested in La Jolla at all. They're just there to take what they can make, and someday they'll leave or something. And this is like the market staying open on Sunday.
Well, I don't want to get involved in this debate in regards to who has more of an interest, a homeowner that comes up one time with a sale of his home for maybe $30,000, $40,000, or the realtor who has a commission involved. I think our argument should be, which I think you would have no objection to, maybe you don't want any advertising of any commercial nature, even if it mentions their name, anywhere in a residential district. I think that as a city, we should be more concerned with the aesthetics of an area. And to me, it would be more aesthetic. It would be aesthetically better to have no signs, with possibly window signs, but not get involved into what's said on the sign, but to reduce it in size from a 2x4, which I think can be obnoxious, to a regular 3-foot square area. Allow them to put it in windows and put it on doors. If it's a realtor that's on there, or for something else, this is a compromise that the mayor was talking about. But I think aesthetically it would improve the area, so when you drive down, you're not hit with some lawn 2 or 3 signs on the very same lawn facing every direction the traffic might take. You seem to be aiming right at the realtor, and that
today, I must say what our real problem is. As president of a group of 55 officers, if we can't get some ordinance that are going to all go to signs in La Jolla, and this is what we're trying to have it. That's why we need your help severely today.
REBA did pass a resolution or agreement among itself that they would abate this and hold off, I think it's for a period of 60 days, as I recall, so that we could bring something to the council to get some sort of feeling as to whether or not there would be any assistance to them. And that is almost to a close. I think if they can get some indication from the council that there will be consideration, this will continue. If not, it won't. But to Jack's point of sending this back with these instructions, I think that's great. But again, keep in mind that if we can go this, what REBA asked for in the first place was no signs. And this would be no problem.
I think this is the compromise on the solution is what the mayor suggested in regard to the allowance possibly of signs and windows. Now, I think it's wonderful that La Jolla comes in with this suggestion. I think it's real fine because they do have this interest. But I would like to take advantage of it and say, what's wrong with Claremont? Signs can be just as obnoxious in Claremont. We could do more to beautify, say, that area by taking the real estate signs off the lawns where there are many more than in La Jolla and put them in windows and so on, and then you might say preserve the aesthetics of an area. And I would rather see us go in that direction than, to me, this ordinance, the way it's worded here, is solely and directly in regards to what goes on the sign, and not necessarily, it does go to the 3-foot, which is, I think, an improvement from our present 8-foot. But when we start getting into who can be put on the sign, then I think we're running into problems.
How can we put a sign in a window on a vacant lot?
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Well, now you got to build a window.
Well, you can have. I mean, if this ordinance aimed at that's another point we haven't even considered. Is it aimed at developed lots or undeveloped lots?
Anything in a
building
residential
permit to
zone.
build one window.
I'd like to ask Mr. Walton, you said the ugly alternative is that all the brokers go with signs. About how many houses and how many signs 55 brokers would be maximized to build?
Somewhere we've got over 500 listings in residential in my office alone.
So you'd have 1 to 10,000 possible sign sizes?
Well, not 10,000. We'd have a lot of signs. The thing is, yes, we'd have a lot of them. To answer your question, it's a great educational process to try to get a broker not to use signs, and this is what would go against going over the whole city and educate people enough.
Well, these 1,000 signs were nice demure little signs that said concerning this property, consult the Coleman Company, you know. This is a very tasteful thing. I wouldn't object to 1,000 of those, but it's the big orange sign that says distress sale, FHA, low down. This would make it light.
Then we're going into an area that we should stay out altogether.
Right, that should be strictly local self-leading. It shouldn't concern the council at all.
But as a general rule anyway, most of these houses that do have real estate signs, most of them have signs through the influence of pushing of the real estate brokers rather than the owners. The owners just as soon basically do not want any signs in their front yard when they sell their properties. And so on these bases, I can understand if the brokers should be let loose in the general area there, the gentleman's agreement, the brokers will be pushing this. And right now, I can see a great deal of restraint on their part, holding back. And the whole concept of this is, here's an area interested in continuing the upgrading of the area, and I think we ought to give them some assistance in upgrading it. If it doesn't work at a later date, well then, if it's not feasible, perhaps then it can be changed. For a number of years, La Jolla, Coronado, during his let's say more glory days, had this sign control, and they don't today, mainly because some of the areas have become quite old and not used in use by the same type of people in the past, but it's somewhat have changed the character of the whole area. And I think La Jolla has come to this point, whether we're going to help them along or let them ride on their own. I think we have some responsibility here on a district basis.
Where are the borderlines of the district?
The question was, where is the borderline of the district? I think at the hearing this can be established, as well as prior to that, a general boundary.
Well, I think that and I would hope sincerely that this be sent to the department, that this could be some consideration of our own department, as well as these are interested in the establishment of a district. And I see nothing wrong with Jack's suggestion of the minimum signs off the lawn.
Smaller signs.
Your Honor, I would move that this ordinance, plus a review of our signing regulations in the city of San Diego, here comes Jim, be referred to the planning department and commission for a report back to the council with the following thoughts in mind. Leaving it the way it is, the establishment of specialized districts, reduction in the size of signs, the elimination of signs completely, or the restriction of signs off the lawn but in or attached to the house. That pretty much summarized all of the things that have been discussed today.
District or citywide?
District is only on one portion of it, and then the others are on a citywide proposal.
Second.
In other words, a thorough study on this matter, plus other recommendations.
Yes.
Pretty broad.
Like get off my back.
No, I would hate to. I want to see us take action, and I would hate to see us bring something through to us that possibly there's some reservations. And now's the time, if we can hammer out something that's agreeable to most, then when we get it in a hearing, it's a hearing on something that we're at least attuned to, somewhat agreeable on. And I think the best way is to come back with a report, schedule another conference, iron the thing out, and we come up with changes in the ordinance. Then when you're holding hearings, they're holding hearings on things that we're somewhat agreed to or on.
I was wondering about what kind of time are we talking about? Because now we will have another conference prior to the time we start hearing. And I was wondering if you have any idea, Jim, as to the time you're talking about prior to the conference.
I would think something like 30 days.
What I was thinking is that there, from looking rapidly at this list, because there are two alternatives, there's still the possibility of a district plus basic sign control of the entire city, but to allow this particular district to be a little more restrictive if it so desires. So it's within the realm of possibility that you might pick up two of these.
Well, they'll come back with a number of recommendations.
Well, you're not limiting then your recommendation to just one. But you won't know till you look into it.
We'd analyze these alternatives and probably cite the advantages and disadvantages and provide a recommendation to the commission. And I suppose the commission could meet with the council and discuss it in conference, or the commission could proceed with a hearing any way council would direct.
You could write a communication back to us which could be placed on the docket, which could turn into a hearing. We've done that before too.
I would suggest
All in favor?
Or suggest a copy of this minutes go to each member of the commission. For the transcript.
Okay, all in favor?
Contrary? Order.
Move adjourned.
I think that this is one other thing we ought to get into. I know we're dragging our feet on this SC zone and clearing it up, and I would like to see us hold a conference on it. I think there are two groups dragging their feet. One is the 200 non-conforming people in La Jolla, because they would just as soon non-conform as long as they can and avoid having a date set. And then as the city is dragging their feet because we don't want to be the bad guys when this date arrives, we're going to have to haul 200 signs down. And I think that this is our responsibility, and we have to face it, and we should have a conference on it. So I'd move we have a conference on the SC zone.
Towards repealing that ordinance, that'll bring it forward.
I'll second that.
Motion to schedule a hearing on the SD ordinance.
No,
This is a conference on the SD ordinance. SD ordinance. All in favor? Contrary? It's ordered. I was just pointing out down on the docket, on January 6th, we have a meeting scheduled already with the Planning Commission on a report from La Jolla and Phoenix. The Planning Commission would be with us that morning. The SD ordinance could be scheduled for, say, 9 or 9:15 on the same morning. Could you be prepared to make a report at that time?
Right. I think we could have a report.
Or the
SC. Apparently, all we need, all
we have the same group here.
all we're doing is just establishing a date when everybody has to conform, whether it be 66, 67.
So you're talking about repealing the ordinance?
No.
Or putting a deadline on it? Thursday, January the 6th. Well,
Will we decide that when we
need? Yeah.
That's one of the things I would hope, if we're looking for suggestions on the agenda that day, since it's kind of timely, is could we get a complete report in regards to the ordinance on Old Town at that time, since it's pretty much current these days. Cole appeared before us and said that there was an ordinance submitted, and that hearings were held and so on. So could you bring us up to date in regards to where the ordinance stands in regards to the Old Town historic district that was almost a year old now?
I could do that right now. There is no ordinance that I know of that's been drafted in the last year or so. There was one drafted about 3 years ago in the attorney's office, but directed towards different questions rather than just Old Town. And insofar as the past few months are concerned, no ordinance has been drafted that I'm aware of.
Now this is over a year ago. In fact, it was June of last year and then August of last year when they asked for a referral on this and what was taking place. And the Vallejo Association was following this through, and one of their part of their critique in regards to opposing the Old Town as a state park was the fact that this ordinance was submitted and that there was some review on it. And I have seen the copy of the ordinance which they submitted. I think it was through the former planning commissioner's name. Their attorney was Colwell, but Whalen, Hugh Whalen, submitted. And I just wondered if you could at that time.
I don't think that was ever officially submitted to anybody. There were copies dropped off here at the council a couple of times that I saw.
No, and then it came to us on their communication and so on. It was referred down to the planning department.
I would suggest we have a historical site board, which will take office about the 6th of January when our historical site board ordinance takes effect, and this is one of the things that they should get into. And we would be overtaking their responsibility, I think, if we got into it just as they are formed. Is that what I said today, Jim? Is that good? Back to the script, huh?
Want to know where we're on?
You're going to leave it.
10:30.